PneumaticCraft is a mod that has many different features, many of which get overlooked in most tech mod packs. Unfortunately, most people don't even know about a lot of these features, and it's difficult to learn how to use them. That's why I'm here though. I'm going to teach you all the things PneumaticCraft has to offer, and just how useful all of these things could be. From the simple to the advanced, everything's here. Thank you, Dronathy. You can return home now. Good work. Hello, this is Pick, and welcome to this guide to the PneumaticCraft mod for Minecraft 1.21. This mod pack that I'm using is FTB Evolution, so if you're playing a different mod pack, things might be a little different, such as Ocean Block 2, which changes a lot of things about PneumaticCraft. If you want to follow along, be sure that there are no changes to the given mechanic I'm discussing that you're looking for in the mod pack of your choosing. I'll be talking about each different category of things sequentially, though it's in whatever order I decide to do them in. Everything will be managed in the video chapters that you will see in the time bar. To get started in the PneumaticCraft mod, we're going to need a crafting component known as compressed iron. To make compressed iron, we place down some TNT, light it, and explode some iron ingots, and it will turn it into compressed iron ingots. Now you'll notice that we put down a stack of iron ingots, but we only got 55 compressed iron back. That's because this recipe has an average 20% loss rate. Depending on how many you do, you might get more or less back, but generally speaking, we're not going to be using this method forever, as it has that loss. You can also use tiny TNT from Applied Energistics if you so desire, if you want something less destructive towards the terrain. However, do note that it still has the same issue with loss, so be wary of that. PneumaticCraft contains a manual that has a lot of in-game documentation about its various mechanics. There's plenty here to look at and a lot of it's good information, but I'll be going over everything anyway on my own. And of course you might need to make some progress to unlock some chapters within this book. But you won't have to encounter anything before you make it anyway, so that's not really an issue for you. There are many different types of air compressor available in this mod. Each of them will generate pressure within your pressure network. Please ignore this pressure chamber. I will discuss pressure chamber mechanics as well as air pressure mechanics in general later in the video. This is just about the compressors themselves. So the first three available are these red ones you see here. We have the manual compressor. If you right click on it with an empty hand, it will pump it and it will use hunger to make air pressure. The nice thing about this is that it cannot make the system explode due to high pressure because you are always using it manually, and thus you can always look to see if the pressure is too high. Then we have the regular air compressor. You put in a burnable solid fuel and it will turn that into air pressure over time. And finally, we have this liquid compressor. If I put in something, say crude oil, it will take a while to burn that liquid fuel and it will keep making pressure from this. Now, if you let the pressure get too high, you're going to cause a burst somewhere in your network. The burst is going to occur at the place where the pressure is overreached first. So let's say you have some regular pressure tubes that are 5 bar. Well, everything here is 5 bar on the small end of the network. But if I were to have one of these higher pressure generators make pressure and turn it higher, it would start creating a rupture at a place like this pressure chamber where there is 5 bars of pressure. The next compressor to talk about is the thermal compressor. Unlike the ones before it and the ones after it, its max pressure is 10 bars specifically. You'll note that it is not connecting to the pressure tubes from the side. This is because it only attaches from the top and the bottom. The north, east, west, and south sides are for things that have temperature values. Now, if I were to put down some ice and put down some lava, you'll see that these temperatures in the thermal compressor are changing, and that's slowly generating pressure as a result. Eventually, this lava is going to cool into obsidian, and this blue ice is going to start to melt and turn into water. This is happening because it's consuming the heat that's present in this lava and distributing it to this ice. I'm going to talk more about heat mechanics later, but what you have to know to use this compressor is that you'll need a system to replace the lava, ice, or whatever hot and cold thing you're working with. And you can see here, we've already turned one lava into an obsidian. I believe it's a random chance, but the fact that it happened now is a good demonstration. And you'll get a good amount of pressure out of it. though again, you're going to need to have a system that makes and replaces a hot source and a cold source in order to use this compressor. The first of the higher tier compressors that I'll be discussing is the electrostatic compressor. This produces pressure from lightning. This holds up to a maximum of 20 bars as opposed to the 10 and 5 of the previous generators. In order to use it, it's going to require a grid of iron bars underneath it. You might want some extra iron bars going down underneath these compressors, because if it happens to have a lightning strike overproduce energy and air pressure within the compressors, the grounded iron bars will help dissipate it. Now, if we want to increase the chance of lightning striking these compressors, we're also going to want some iron bars above it, and this giant network of iron bars underneath to increase the chances that this lightning is going to hit. Note that this works without rain. You don't need to be in a thunderstorm for it to work, and on the contrary, lightning bolts don't actually do anything. The lightning that it uses is fake, so if you use an R spell or something to generate lightning, it's not going to work on these compressors. However, that doesn't mean we can't increase our chances by having the mesh of iron bars. Now, the iron bar mesh is only going to work up to 5 blocks away from the compressor. This is 4 blocks away, but if we were to go to one of these, it would be 6 blocks away, and this would be the last one that works, and that one wouldn't. So, in order to get maximum efficiency out of it, you're going to want to have that big grid of iron bars. It also works above and below, so if you want to have a mesh of it going above it, you can do that. And it'll even, quote-unquote, strike the generators if you have solid blocks on top. So I guess they do work underground or something, but you know, it would look better to have this kind of thing outside. Next up is the solar compressor. It generates pressure from sunlight. It has a temperature mechanic, so if it's above 350 degrees, it's running at maximum efficiency. However, if it reaches 425 degrees, it's going to break down, and you'll have to repair it manually using a solar cell. Just be wary of its temperature, and if necessary, you might need to make a heat distribution system to get rid of that excess heat, or some heat vents or something. I'll go over heating mechanics later. Just know that the solar compressor is basically exactly what it says in the name. Next up, we have the advanced air compressor and the advanced liquid compressor. These are basically the same as their regular counterparts, you know, with higher stats of course. These compressors produce 5 times the amount of air by default. However, they come with the caveat of a heat mechanic. If the temperature inside either of these exceeds 50 degrees Celsius, it's going to have diminishing returns on the amount of air pressure being produced. So you're going to need some type of network to manage the heat and take it away from the compressors, so that they keep generating it at a proper rate. If we look at the inside of each of them, you'll also notice that the pressure goes up to 20 bars, as with all of these other higher tier compressors. The final 2 machines we'll be talking about in regards to generating air pressure are the Flux compressor and the Pneumatic Dynamo. Now, the Dynamo is not a compressor, it is actually the opposite of a compressor, but the Flux compressor, when given RF power or forge energy or any equivalent, will produce pressure. So you can see that the pressure is going to start going up now that we are giving it power. Like these other machines, this has a heat mechanic, where it will have lower energy, compression power if the temperature exceeds that 50 degrees Celsius cap. Now, the pneumatic dynamo is basically the opposite of a compressor in that it turns pressure into energy. However, it does have a caveat in its own that it cannot produce energy unless it has at least 15 bars of pressure inside it. So, if I were to get a creative compressor here and put it down and set this to 15 bars, we'll just do 16. Now the pressure is going up and we are actually going to generate a little bit of power, and we'll see that it's consuming 100 milliliters of air per tick. Well, I guess the energy is going to quickly go down because you need to manage the temperature, but you get the point. If you use this pneumatic dynamo, you can turn pressure back into electricity. Obviously, if you're using a flux compressor, it's going to be very lossy to do this, so why would you want to do it? But you get the idea here. These would be useful in separate setups, maybe if you want to hook up one of these other generators and then use the pneumatic dynamo, that's something you could do. But yeah, that's the flux compressor and the pneumatic dynamo. Let's talk about pressure distribution and all the mechanics about that. So, first, there are 3 different tiers of pressure tube. The regular pressure tube handles up to 5 bars of pressure. The reinforced pressure tube handles up to 10 bars of pressure, and the advanced pressure tube handles up to 20 bars of pressure. Each of these handles their own separate tier, and they can connect. So if you were to place down some tubes, they would still form connections. You can separate them in intersections using a tube junction. The tube junction allows 2 separate pressures to exist simultaneously. They don't have to be of different tiers. You can use the same tier, but you can see that this pressure tube is 4 bars, and this pressure tube is half a bar, and they can coexist peacefully because these compressors and tubes are separated by this tube junction. Now, pressure drops over distance. This is because there's a mechanic with pressure, and the pressure is going to increase or decrease with relative distance from this creative compressor or whatever source of pressure you have in your system. You can see that I have this creative compressor set to 3 bars, and in the beginning of the pipe, it's 3 bars. But the further down I go along the line, you'll start to notice a pressure drop. Now, it will do the best it can to equalize the pressure throughout the entire network, but there's still going to be passive loss from your tubes as well as just from distance. The better tubes have less loss, and you'll want to store pressure based off of the total volume available in the network. Now, these pressure tubes each hold a small amount of air in them, but the bulk of your storage of pressure on your network is going to be in various machines, such as your compressors and your pressure chambers. If I were to build a pressure chamber right here and stick a pressure tube on, what do we think is going to happen? And I'm also going to block this up and remove the compressor so that we can see exactly what happens when I attach it. If I put this on, you'll immediately notice that there is a sharp pressure drop. This is because all of this new area on our pressure network has to equalize the pressure between all of the available tubes. So, this means that our pressure overall is going to be a lot lower since there's no more 3-bar pressure generator on this network. The pressure chamber itself stores air, and pressure works on a function based off of the amount of air in the system and the volume of the system that you have. So, if we look at the pressure, you'll notice that we have about 34,000 milliliters of air in this pressure chamber. There are also 16,000 milliliters of air as the base volume of this machine. Well, if you notice, the pressure is 2.15 bar. Where does that come from? Well, using some quick head math, double 16 is 32, so that means that if we had 32,000 milliliters of air divided by 16, we get 2. So, would you look at that? It's a little more than 32,000, so that's where the 0.15 comes from. So, this air divided by this base volume gives us this pressure. And that's true no matter where you are on the network. So, pretty much, while we see pressure, it's actually a function of the amount of air available within this container. This is why, if we were to look at our compressors, it tells us how much air it's producing rather than how much pressure it produces, because pressure is a function of air. And if we look at this air amount, well, let's see. That has a base volume of 10,000 milliliters. This has just about 9,000 milliliters of air, and this has about 0.9 bar. 9,000 divided by 10,000 is 0.9. So there you go. Easy math. Now, what happens when too much pressure gets in our tubes? After all, it has a cap. Well, if I were to speed up this generator, or compressor, I have so many outtakes of me saying generator, it's very annoying. Well, in any case, we'll watch the pressure go up, and once it passes that 5 threshold, give it a second. It is going to be taking some time, but we can hear some creaking, and eventually, there you go. There's now a rupture. So yeah, we want to be careful with how much pressure we're making, and I'll show you techniques for managing this later. I will show a basic method for managing pressure in the early game now though. We just need a security upgrade. If I were to put a security upgrade in this air compressor and start giving it some coal, it's going to, of course, generate pressure, as it should. But when it reaches that 5-bar cap, we're going to see that it just vented some air to prevent it from exploding. So yeah, if you want to be easygoing early on, you can use a security upgrade in order to prevent the compressor from exploding. Do note that this is relative to the compressor only and not the rest of the network. Before I was using an advanced air compressor, this wouldn't activate that module until it hits 20 bars, so the pipes are going to keep exploding no matter what. One last thing to discuss when talking about air pressure is that the more volume you have on your network, the longer it will take for that pressure to keep up. Of course, this is based off of that whole pressure thing I talked about earlier, because this only generates so much air at a time. And this means that each thing receiving air is going to keep receiving less and less. And so, when there's a higher volume available, it's going to take longer for that pressure fraction to increase. Now that we've talked about pressure, let's talk about temperature, the other main mechanic in PneumaticCraft. So, as we know, many things in Minecraft have an associated temperature. Well, okay, maybe we didn't know that because they don't interact normally. If we have lava next to ice in vanilla, nothing's going to happen. And even with PneumaticCraft installed, if they're just touching like this, nothing is going to happen. However, if we have a block of compressed iron that tells this block, hey, you should be transferring your heat, it's going to take the heat from the lava and move it into the ice. And so, these are going to share temperature. Naturally, heat flows from hot to cold, much like pressure goes from high pressure to low pressure. And slowly but surely, this compressed iron is going to heat up, absorbing all the heat from the lava. Now, things might happen when this heat is exposed. So, you can see that each block has a temperature value and a thermal resistance. Most average blocks don't have one. You're not going to be needing to worry about your dirt heating up or anything. But for things that do have a temperature value, there's a temperature, a thermal resistance, and a heat capacity. Now, you don't really need to know the nitty-gritty and all the math behind this, but what I will tell you is that pretty much everything in JEI is what you're going to see. So, the higher values of thermal resistance mean it's going to take longer for the heat to go up or down. Much like having a higher pressure volume will make it take longer for your pressure to go up or down. But in this case, each individual material has its own separate thermal values. Once this heat capacity value is exceeded, just as this lava just did, it's going to transform into the state that turns it into the other block. And in this case, the lava, once it passes that threshold, will turn into obsidian. Ice will turn between its forms, blue to packed to regular, and there are other such ways of producing heat or cold and distributing it. The main way of generating heat, other than using blocks that already have a default value, is to use a vortex tube. A vortex tube converts a pressure into a temperature differential. There will be a hot side and a cold side on it. It's pretty obvious which is which. The red is hot, the blue is cold. And so we can use that to make things hot or cold, such as this block of compressed iron. Now, there are two main ways of transporting this heat. We have the compressed iron blocks, and we have heat pipes. Both of these are going to lose heat to the surrounding air if they are not covered, but every covered face acts as a block of insulation, no matter what it is, as long as it is not a thermally sensitive block. This means that dirt counts as insulation, or stone, or anything of that nature, so long as it doesn't have a temperature value associated with it. Many machines in PneumaticCraft do things relating to heat. The previously discussed compressors sometimes have losses if their heat is too high, but also might work better if their heat is higher. In addition, some machines have specific temperature ranges that they want to go through, and you'll be needing to control that temperature sometimes by limiting the pressure going into a vortex tube or by measuring the temperature with, say, a thermostat module on a tube. More on modules later. There are going to be ways to modify your systems based off of pressure and temperature, and I'll get to those soon. Thermal lagging is a form of insulative block that has no collision, so if you want a way to insulate your machines without just covering them in stone, you can do that. And you can also click through thermal lagging. If I were to get out a refinery, just real quick, and put it down and start covering it in thermal lagging, you can see that I can still access the machine GUI through this block face. So it's worth to use thermal lagging. Also, heat pipes will connect to any blocks they're touching. So if I wanted to transfer heat values to places, I could use these heat pipes to do it. Compressed iron also does it, but note that you can't transport fluid temperatures with heat pipes because the fluid will not connect to the heat pipe itself. You can waterlog them though if you want to run a cooling system through water, but you'll probably want some type of better coolant, usually in most applications. One way of managing pressure is to use heat sinks. The heatsink will distribute the heat into nearby adjacent blocks into the air, and it will also work better if you have an air grate tube module on a tube facing it. Of course, you're going to need some type of pressure so that it sucks in the air, because this is like a grate that goes into the tube, and it like acts as a vacuum kind of, and it sucks that hot air, and you can see that it's working a lot better now that there's a pressure here and it's taking that air. But if I were to disconnect it, so yeah, effectively the heatsink controls the heat and allows it to disperse into the surrounding air. This also works just on the vortex tube. If you want, you can slap one down and it'll distribute that temperature on the block into its surroundings. Now let's go over all the crafting mechanics within this mod. The first one will be the pressure chamber. It comes in 3 sizes, 3x3x3, 4x4x4, and 5x5x5. Of course, you're going to need to fill the structure out completely, as well as add a valve to make the structure form properly. Note that the valve cannot go on the edges or corners. However, you can put either glass or regular pressure chamber walls on the edges or corners, and that lets you make some really cursed looking pressure chambers. Now, in order to craft with it, we're going to need to put items in and take items out. So, let's place down some interfaces. You'll want to make sure that you have a blue side and an orange side on the outside of the pressure chamber. This means you have an input and an output. So, if we put a hopper on the input and a chest on the output, and we give some pressure to the pressure chamber, and put some items in, it will put the items into the pressure chamber and craft them into the product. Note that interface transfers take some pressure out of the pressure chamber. Obviously, with a creative compressor, this is not going to happen. Also, the pressure in the pressure chamber can only go up to 5 bars, and you'll need to meet the minimum threshold for any given recipe. You can see those in JEI if you look on the page. It's typically a good practice to process larger stacks of items in the pressure chamber at a given time. This is because you're having less transfers from opening the interface door less, and so because of that, we will be filling the interface faster and only doing one transfer for each for an entire stack of items, as opposed to having only a few items at a time go. Though there is a limit on how many items can fit in the pressure chamber at a time, so be sure to check the crafting recipe, and if you're using an item that has a very large recipe of several items, like 4 or 5 items, you can't make entire stacks of it at a time. You'll have to limit it. Now, what if you've accidentally put an item in the pressure chamber that you didn't want going in? Or perhaps you put in the wrong ratio for a recipe and you have some leftover material. Well, to fix this, we can look at the output interface and click this button to change it from only export crafted items to export all items. Note that there is an input filter on the pressure chamber. you can't just put whatever you want in there. I can't just put some random item with no pressure chamber recipe into the pressure chamber, because that won't work. So, if I have something that does have a recipe, and it's in, I can simply change that button to output, and it will output all of that into the chest. Of course, you'll want to change it back to crafted once you're done with that, because other than you can't do any crafting, as it will just automatically export everything. Each size of pressure chamber also has a different effect on the total pressure network that you might be running it off of. So, the small pressure chamber has the smallest volume, which means that it will be the fastest to change its internal pressure, as it will take less air to fill it up. Likewise, the big pressure chamber is going to take a lot longer to fill. However, if you craft with it, it will decrease slower because there's more pressure buffered. Pressure chambers can effectively act as a battery for your air pressure. It's useful to have one on smaller networks just to maintain a consistent level of pressure. However, to get started, you'll probably want one of the small ones, as it'll fill up quicker and there's less wait time. Next, let's talk about the heat frame. The heat frame can be placed on any inventory, and if we put items inside the heat frame, various things could happen depending on the temperature. If I were to add heat to the heat frame, it'll act as a furnace. Some recipes might require that I cool down the heat frame, so if I were to put, say, this molten plastic in and cool it down, it'll turn the molten plastic into plastic sheets. This is useful for furnace automation or for whatever recipes are special to this particular mechanic. You'll also need to make sure that there's available space within an inventory for the item to smelt, or process, or what have you. So, if you want to manage that, it might be a good idea to use a smart chest. More on smart chests later. All you have to know is that if I were to smelt these items, if I were to fill it up, it wouldn't allow any more smelting to occur, and it won't try to smelt this stone into smooth stone. The Thermopneumatic processing plant and the fluid mixer are two fairly standard machines. They have item inputs, they have pressure, and they make things in the output. The Thermopneumatic processing plant also has a heat component, so you'll need to make sure that your recipes fall within the temperature and pressure requirements for the given item. In addition, the fluid mixer processes faster depending on how high its pressure is, so if you give it more pressure, it'll process quicker. The Thermopneumatic processing plant does not have any ways of speeding it up beyond external measures such as tick acceleration. On the topic of plastic, let's talk about making printed circuit boards. In order to make a printed circuit board, you'll need an empty printed circuit board. This is made in the pressure chamber by default. Then, when the pressure chamber is done, you can put your empty PCB into the UV light box. Of course, you're going to need to give some pressure to the UV light box to make it work. And you're going to need to determine what threshold you want the PCB to work at. Of course, maintaining a high pressure is good for having the machine operate quickly, but over time this PCB is going to develop, and the threshold tells it when it should be ejecting the empty PCB. And so what that means is you're seeing that it has an etch success chance that's going up. So this means that when we take it out and place it into the etching tank, when it finishes etching, there will be, let's say, an 80% chance for it to succeed and a 20% chance for it to fail. So this failed PCB would have to get reprocessed, but if it succeeds, it'll turn into a finished PCB, which then can be sent to the assembly table for finalizing. What threshold you want to set it at is your choice, but if you want to set it to 100, it will take longer. The higher the percent, the slower it's going to go, so you'll want to find a threshold that suits your needs when making these PCBs in the UV light box. As per usual, it's affected by tick acceleration, so you can always use that to quickly finish your PCBs. So now that we have this 90% finished PCB, we're going to need to put it into the etching tank. and we're going to need to supply that etching tank with etching acid. And so over time this is going to etch. By default it has a somewhat slow speed to etch, but it can process up to 25 at a time. However, if I were to add some heat to this block, it'll start consuming the etching acid, but it'll also start going slower the more acid you provide it with. Otherwise, it's going to take 2.5 minutes for a PCB to be finished. The higher you set the temperature, the quicker it's going to use up the etching acid, but the more it will decrease the time. Next, let's talk about the refinery. By default, the refinery is only used to process oil. However, your mod pack might have more recipes depending on what's available. The number of outputs is going to determine what recipe it's going to make. It will always make the recipe with the highest number of outputs if it has the maximum number. So if I have 4 outputs, it will always choose the recipe that makes 4 things. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you cover this. Make sure every side and face of the refinery controller and outputs are covered so that we can provide it with heat. Otherwise, the heat will escape into the environment. Now, if I were to put some oil in and pump it, you'll see it starts separating the oil into various oil derivatives: diesel, kerosene, gasoline, and liquid petroleum gas. And all of those are coming out on the outputs. The order you see them in here is bottom to top. And as long as you make sure everything is covered, the heat should stay within the system and it will do its job. Also, all of these crafting machines here, well, most of them, I guess the heat frames don't, but most of these machines have redstone control, so that's just regular to be expected. Turn it off under a given condition. This is also used in the making of plastic. I've already gone over the machines for making plastic, but if I were to look at the recipe, you can see that it comes from cooling this liquid plastic. And since I guess we're talking about plastic, if I were to place down some liquid plastic here, it'll turn into a plastic sheet. But anyway, the recipe for the plastic, you cool down molten plastic, and then you make that using LPG in the thermopneumatic processing plant, and that becomes molten plastic with some coal. The final dedicated crafting mechanic to discuss is the assembly station. In order to create it, we're going to need to put down a whole bunch of components next to all of these parts and pieces. You're going to need the following: 2 assembly I/O units, one that's import and one that's export, an assembly drill, an assembly laser, an assembly controller, and the assembly platform. You will also need a program to run it. If you have both the drill and the laser, I believe you just need to use the drill and laser program, and that will craft whatever you need it to. So, if I were to put down an inventory that is adjacent to both of these I/O units, and I were to put in a valid recipe into the chest, we will see that this I/O unit is slowly going to craft. It's going to take out the input item from the chest, and it will move it over to the platform. Do know that everything has to be around the platform, because it has to be able to reach it. And it's decently slow. You will probably want some speed upgrades if you can support it with your pressure. But it'll get going, and it'll start cutting up whatever item it's supposed to be working on. And it'll put it into the chest. Yeah, again, you're probably going to want some speed upgrades, more on upgrades later, but that's the assembly platform. It's not that complicated. There are just a bunch of parts you need, and you need to maintain a pressure. There is one more thing that counts as a crafting mechanic that I'll discuss in this section of the video. We can make yeast culture in the thermopneumatic processing plant using mushrooms and water, but we can also use it by producing it in the world. So, in order to make this properly, if I toss in a sugar and put down a water, it's going to turn that water into more yeast culture. So, once again, toss in a sugar, put down some water, and it'll turn it into a yeast culture. I will have the tutorial for automating this at the end of the video, so if you're interested in that, look towards the end. Before we move on to more gameplay mechanics, let's quickly talk a bit about decorative options. There are many options available. There are different types of plastic blocks available, and you can craft them in any of the available dye colors in Minecraft. Then we have wall lamps. There are normal and inverted lamps. Normal lamps don't emit light unless powered by redstone. Inverted lamps emit light unless they are powered by redstone. So these are always on, these are always off. Then there's also reinforced stone. You've crafted plenty of this if you've done the progression. It has a high blast resistance, so that's useful if you want to use it for that. And then we have this display shelf. There are also display tables. You can put items on them and, well, display them as it says. And finally we have these aphorism tiles. If we put down a whole bunch of words on this, just a bunch of letters, it'll automatically scale things to fit all the text onto the tile, but if you make a line that's too long, it might make it too small to read. You can also dye the background as well as the text plane, so you could have it look like whatever you want. And you can make the tile invisible and only display the text. Also adjust the size of the margins to make the text shrink if you want. You can have it display an item if you wish. Say I wanted to display some wood. It will automatically show that it will display some wood. And if I use this redstone button, it will show the relative redstone signal of the block that it is currently attached to. Note that you are not changing the redstone signal of the block itself. Now let's talk about all the wonderful items and gadgets that are within PneumaticCraft. First, we'll just go over the basic regular compressed iron armor. It's armor. It's decently good, but it's not the best armor. What's really good is the pneumatic armor. This is a special power suit, and you can upgrade it using various upgrades. How do we charge it though? After all, it needs air pressure. Well, that's where the charging station comes in. If you put a given gadget into the charging station, it will slowly charge up over time. Of course, speed upgrades will make it go faster, and you'll need to upgrade the armor to actually, upgrade it. So with all of these upgrades, you can see there are many options for each individual. If you click on these, it'll tell you what the given upgrade does, but we don't really need that because we're going to be talking about all the upgrades in the upgrade section of the video. You just have to know that if you click on this button, you'll access the upgrade menu, and this is where you can insert all of the upgrades you want on a given piece of armor. It's also worth saying that the charging station can never input a pressure into an item that's higher than the pressure it is currently receiving. If you want to give a higher pressure to an item, you'll need to make sure that you raise the pressure that the charging station is receiving. Now let's talk about all the various configuration tools within this mod. So, first we have the pneumatic wrench. With the pneumatic wrench, I can right click on a pressure tube and it will disable that side, meaning that it will not leak air from this direction. You can also use it to rotate any machine in case you want to change the way it is configured. Shift right clicking any machine will also pick it up. Of course, that includes pressure tubes, and it will happen instantaneously. Next, the logistics configurator. I'll get more into the logistics network later, but the logistics configurator is usually used for toggling things relating to the logistics network, such as setting filters on various logistics filters and frames, as well as other things relating to, well, logistics. Next we have the Camouflage Applicator. Right-click any block to save it as the current stored filter, and then right-click a block to apply it. You can apply whatever block you want. It'll automatically apply it to the pressure, and it even copies the texture of multi-blocks. If you want to remove it, you can simply right-click it again, and you can clear the filter with a shift right-click. Note that this uses up blocks from your inventory, so if I click on this, you'll notice the ash brick amount going down by 1 when I apply that camouflage. Next, let's talk about air canisters. There are 4 different types. The arrays store more air than the regular single canisters. The reinforced air canisters are able to sustain a higher pressure. So, if I put this inside one of the charging station, and I were to just speed this up so that it charges quicker, let it go really fast so that it goes all the way up. Alright, that's probably high enough. If we shift right click, it will change a mode. It's going to be changing between charging your held item and charging all items. And if it's charging all of the items, you'll already see all of these air canisters holding a higher pressure of air. Now something you'll also notice is that these air canisters are only able to go up to the pressure that's in this air canister supplying to it. You see these are both 4.1 bar. This is also 4.1 bar. I don't know why that one's 4.3. I guess it was just with the speed. But you kind of get the point here. This distributes air to all of the other things in my inventory, and it will not give more pressure than it is able to supply, as it balances it out, much like the regular tube networks. The next tool to cover is the Pneumatic Jackhammer. Shift right click to open its inventory. You can put an enchanted book in to mine with Silk Touch or Fortune, and you can also put in a drill bit to raise the total amount of blocks that can be mined at once. An iron drill bit isn't very good. It's not going to be able to mine in a very large area. However, anything higher than that will start to be able to dig in a larger volume. Now, this only applies if you're in survival, but you're not really going to care about that in creative anyway. But the higher tier drill bit you use, the bigger the area you can start mining. The diamond drill bit can handle a 3x3, and the netherite drill bit can go even further beyond that, mining an incredibly large area. Basically vein mining in a shapeless fashion, which might not be too useful if you have vein mining in your mod pack and it's just regular vein mining with no restrictions, but this is still a cool, fun tool to use in the event that you want to use that. It's also kind of loud, so you might want to put in some muffling upgrades. There are other upgrades you can give it, like a magnet upgrade. Again, you can put that into the charging station and it will tell you what all of the available upgrades are and what each of them do for this particular item. On the topic of things that are way too loud, we have the minigun. The minigun can store up to 4 different cartridges of ammo at once. It has regular ammo, which can be potioned to have different effects. It has armor-piercing rounds, which go through armor. It has incendiary ammo, which makes fire. It has explosive ammo, which causes explosions. Freezing ammo, which will freeze targets. And weighted ammo, which will do a lot of damage. But it also has a short range, and it will use more air. So, if we were to just load this with some types of ammo and spawn some mobs, we wait for it to rev up just a bit, and you can see how fast this thing completely shreds enemies. It's absolutely crazy, and it's a good thing you can't hear this because it is ridiculously loud. Again, muffling upgrades, probably going to be helpful. You'll also notice that each of them has a different ammo amount. Obviously, since I'm in creative mode, it's not consuming any ammo, but you'll have to see in the recipe what you want to be using for a given type of ammo for a target. Another ranged weapon is Micromissiles. You can shift right click with them to change them between smart and dumb mode. Dumb mode just fires the rocket out straight and fast, and it does a lot of damage. Smart mode is going to be slower, but you can deliberately set what stats you want the given micromissiles to have. You can also set an entity filter if you want. So if I wanted to go all in on speed and handling, we'll put down some spiders, and you can see that it's going to home in on those enemies while not doing a lot of damage. If I just set them to dumb mode, it immediately obliterates everything in its path. Absolutely crazy weaponry we have in this mod. But it is kind of expensive, I suppose. You can always fill it with TNT, though, to renew its durability. So if you want more missiles, it's not too expensive to refill. But yeah, very strong weapon. Can even home in on targets. Next, let's talk about bandages. You can see I'm very damaged right now. If I hold down the bandage, it will heal me. It has a cooldown. Pretty simple, but if you need a heal in a pinch and you don't have any healing potions and you want something that stacks, this does the job. 3 hearts. Not terrible, not great. Next we have the Vortex Cannon. The Vortex Cannon fires a puff of air. This puff of air will go faster and be stronger the more pressure the Vortex Cannon has in it when you fire it. It also can harvest crops and mow grass. In addition, you can use it for mobility by letting yourself get caught within the puff of air. However, it doesn't provide any fall resistance, so it will still do some fall damage to you if you're not careful. You can also use it to make mobs go away. The next item is a memory stick. Right click with the memory stick to store levels from you into the stick. Shift right click to put them back onto your player. It has a fairly high internal storage. You can even left click with it to turn it onto XP absorb automatically. So if I were to spawn a spider or 2 and get out some missiles, you can see that the XP orb automatically went into the memory stick. The manometer is a way of measuring pressure inside a given block. Right click on a block and it will tell you the pressure of that block. Do note that you can see this on the top with Jade or Wayla or Hyla or whatever it's called in the version you're playing. But that doesn't mean that this item doesn't exist, I suppose. The Seismic Sensor is a block that will let you find oil easier if it's underground. Oil spawns in naturally kind of large pockets, but unfortunately I don't think they spawn in Evolution, so just for the sake of this video I placed down some oil myself so you can tell that it works. This is what it'll tell you, approximately how much there is, and how far away it is. Now that all of the items are done, let's start talking about storage, logistics, and other types of manipulation of items and fluids. First, let's shift right click on a chest with a reinforced chest upgrade kit to get a reinforced chest, and do it again to get a smart chest. The reinforced chest is a blast-proof chest which contains its inventory when you break it, and the smart chest allows slot filtering for some very interesting and useful forms of managing items. If I were to put a stack of items in this smart chest, hold Alt and click on it, you'll see this little 45 on the top that comes up. I can take this out, try to put a stack in, but this stack will only allow 45 ash bricks to enter this slot. I can clear the filter by holding Alt and clicking it again. The smart chest can also automatically pull and push items. Simply adjust the filters on the side here, and it will pull items from this chest and push them into this one. You can also use some speed upgrades to increase the rate of transfer of items between these inventories. You can also use a magnet upgrade and put this in, and any side set to pull that does not have an inventory will automatically suck items up in the area in front of it, as so. There's also redstone control to let you turn the automatic moving around in and out. and you can manipulate the amount size of a stack by using all of these instructions here on this tab on the left. You can do that in game and just, have control over that yourself. There are other ways of moving items around, such as the transfer gadget. You can place it on any side of an inventory and place any inventory in the block next to it, and it will transfer items from one inventory to the other, with no need for a block space in between. You can also alter the direction by using the logistics configurator. Now it's moving in the other direction. In a similar vein, we have the omnidirectional hopper. Place it on an inventory, it'll act as a hopper in any direction. You can also change the direction using the pneumatic wrench if you so desire, but it will always keep the output on the same inventory. Only the input changes. You can even use a dispenser upgrade to force it to export the items onto the ground in the world. Useful for some types of automation, like the aforementioned yeast. There are several tiers of fluid storage tank in PneumaticCraft, going all the way up to 512 buckets. The tanks allow you to pick up and move fluids, and they retain their inventory when broken. To move fluids around, you might be interested in a liquid hopper. Place a fluid in a tank, and it will slowly trickle it over into another fluid inventory. Like with the omnidirectional hopper, you can put a dispenser upgrade into it to have it automatically deploy a fluid. The air cannon allows transfer of items through the air. Shift right click on an inventory to designate it in a GPS tool. Put the GPS tool into the cannon and load the cannon with some items. Now, this is a little far away for this cannon to hit, so we're going to put some range upgrades in the cannon as well. Now it should be able to fire the items further, and it will be able to reach it. However, it's worth saying that you probably don't want the cannon to be angled downward. Simply decrease the fire power a little bit, and it will adjust its aim accordingly. Then, if I press the button, it will fire the items, and they will land at their destination. So, if I were to put down a hopper, I could instead aim for that. Put the things in, and apply a redstone signal and fire it. And everything lands in the hopper, and that all goes into the chest. Now we're going to talk about the logistics network. That's right, there's an item logistics network in PneumaticCraft, and it all uses pressure tubes. So to get started, we're going to put logistics modules on each of these tubes, facing the inventory that we wanted to interact with. Then we're going to need to put on some type of frame. There are 5 types. We have passive provider, requester, storage, active provider, and default. It would help if I actually put the frames onto the inventories. Now, these frames might look a little familiar, or rather their colors might look a little familiar from some other game that I'm sure you've never heard of. They work basically in the same way as said other game that you probably have never heard of. But to make most use out of this logistics network, there are 2 types of filters we want to look at: tag filters and classify filters. Classify filters have a whole bunch of pre-made options for you to click on that will allow it to filter to anything that fits within these categories. Just simply click on one of these boxes and it will add that classification to the list. The tag filter uses item tags instead. If we put the tag filter in here and we put in some iron, we can see a whole list of tags that iron has. So if I just wanted to put any old ingot into this tag, I now made a filter for ingots. All ingots, so iron, gold, copper, etc. To set up filters for the request network, simply right-click on a frame with the logistics configurator, and you can set the filter in the GUI. You can take items from your inventory, drag them from JEI, or you could use the tag filter I mentioned earlier. Left-click to put it in. You can also right-click to left-click it again to get rid of it. Note that the stack size is specifically configured to whatever is going on in here. So you can see that there are 3 different filters here. And just to show that this filtering works, if I were to put all these items in, it's going to find them and send them through the network until the right amount of stuff enters the desired inventory. Oh, it helps if you set the filter correctly though. Now, one at a time, let's go over all of these frames. So the first one is the passive provider frame. This will allow any items on the network in it to be sent out to various spots requested by requester frames. It doesn't actively send items anywhere, it just means they're available on the network. This button allows you to change it from a blacklist to a whitelist if you want to set a filter. It starts with a blank blacklist, so that means that any items can come out of it. If you want, you can click this, and it'll make the frame invisible unless you are holding the logistics configurator or some other logistics item. Then there's also settings for the filter. We have item durability, which means that if you have items with different durabilities but they're the same item, you can click this and it will make it specifically only filter to the durability that you have set in the filter. By default, it means that any, say, stone pickaxe would go, but if you have a stone pickaxe that you've used 3 times, if you have this clicked, it will not send stone pickaxes that are full durability to a 3 damage durability filter, if that makes sense. Then we have item components. This allows for extra filtering based off of enchantments. It will make sure that only a efficiency 2 fortune 1 gold pickaxe is allowed through. And then we have mod ID. If this is clicked, this basically says anything from a mod that is an item in this filter. So say this transfer gadget, if I were to put that in the filter, any PneumaticCraft item would be registered from this tick box. So yeah, this is the basics of each of these settings, and the passive provider frame allows requester frames to request items from this inventory. Next we have the active provider frame. This will actively push items into it into the rest of the network. If you've ever set up a sorting system before where you have a dump chest where you put in all the items from a mining trip or something, this is the frame that does that job. You can dump anything you want into this inventory and it will send it to any other available chest. First the requester frames, then the storage, and then it doesn't send it to passive provider. It only sends it to these storage ones or the requester. Then we have storage frames and default storage frames. Storage frames have a higher priority than default storage frames, so if I were to put an item into this chest and it has nowhere else to go, if it can only go between these, it will always go to this one. In addition, items that come out of here will go into this inventory if you have it set to push items out of this location. So yeah, this is more of a middle ground buffer, and this is like your main storage hub. So just to recap on all those priorities and everything, this is the order in which items are sent from most send to highest receive. The active provider chest will push anything out of it into the network. The default storage frame is the first place things will go or will be taken from if needed by something. Things in here might also get sent to the storage frame. The storage frame is your generic in-out. It will provide anything that to these and it will take from these. The passive provider frame is often used for automated processes where you might want an inventory to always be stocked from a machine, but it's always going to be taking from this if it has nothing else in the regular storage. But it won't be sending anything anywhere unless a requester frame is requesting it and nothing below it is has that item in it. The requesting frame will draw in all items needed by its filters and make sure it's stocked all the time. Let's start going over all the various modules that will fit on the side of a pressure tube. The first is the pressure gauge tube module. Place it down, place down some redstone dust, and it will emit a redstone signal proportional to what is in the tube. For every half a bar, it will emit another power worth of redstone. So if I were to just increase it ever so slightly, this is saying that this pressure is 4 bar. I know the other one also said 4 bar, but remember that there's a tiny bit of pressure loss, so this pushes it past the 4 bar threshold. We are now emitting 4 bar, and that therefore means there is a redstone signal of 8 coming out of this module. You can also right click on it with a pneumatic wrench to change it to a numerical and or I guess alphanumeric display, telling you what it is instead of this nice little dial. Now, if we were to click on this with a module expansion card, and you'll see that there's this new green border, we can right click on it and have some advanced configuration as to when redstone comes out of this. So let's say I wanted it to only go at 4.4 bar, right? Only emit when it is higher than 4.4 bar. You could even make a very complex way to manage the thresholds here. Like I can have it only emit between 3.7 and 5.9 if I so desired, and it'll set a proportional redstone range based off of that. You can kind of see it based on this graph here. This is the side of the redstone power, and this is the threshold in bars of pressure. But if you don't want to do that, you can just emit when higher than 3.7 bar, and it'll emit the full redstone signal of 15 when it passes that threshold. Next, we have the safety tube module. This is a fairly simple module. If the pressure goes over the maximum for a particular pressure tube, it'll automatically vent that air. Of course, that's wasteful. You generally want to make a better setup, but in an emergency, this might help you. It also automatically changes if you happen to put it on a higher tier pressure tube, and it will have a higher threshold of 19.9 instead of just 4.9. Always better to make better systems though, so don't get too reliant on these. And as before, you can put a module expansion card to have more control. In this case, you're just going to control the exact pressure that it does its venting at. The charging module will allow you to charge items in an inventory as long as it's lower than the pressure tube that it is attached to. It does, however, work in reverse, so if you put in an item that's a very high pressure, it will depressurize it to match what's in the pressure tube network. And if we put in a module expansion card, the module charges items in the chest much quicker. Next, we have the air grate tube module. We used that before with those heat vents, if you recall. But in general, what it does is going to start pushing mobs away if it has a positive pressure inside the tube, and if it has a negative pressure, it will start pulling things in. A negative pressure is achieved with a vacuum pump, but we'll get to that in a bit. We can filter the entities if we put in a module expansion card. Here you can see I have put a sheep in as the filter. The sheep is moving, the cow is not. If I were to add, say, instead change it to cow, the cow is moving and the sheep is not. Next is the thermometer module. It can read the temperature of any block placed in front of it. It will send this signal along the channel that it states it's going to send it to, and that can be linked to a redstone module that is set to the same channel. So, if I were to put down some redstone dust, we can see that, oh, it's emitting redstone. But if I make this super cold, it's not emitting redstone anymore. Module expansion card will allow advanced behaviors, much like the other ones. You can set custom ranges that modulate the redstone that comes out. And I guess since we're talking about the redstone module, you can invert the output if you'd like. The operation can go through any number of logics here, reading off of 2 different channels at the same time. You could set a redstone clock, you could set a comparator, whole bunch of logic gates. We're not really here for a class on logic gates, so if you don't understand what any of this is, you're probably not going to want to use it anyway. But yeah, the point being is that, oh, and you can also set it to receive redstone and send it elsewhere as a type of wireless redstone on your pressure network. If you so desired though, you could send redstone signals elsewhere on the network. Very handy. These are kind of like Ender IO conduits, and just nobody knows about them. It's actually kind of crazy just how robust this stuff is. Next we have the flow detector tube module. These ones up ahead are a little different. Instead of fitting on the side of a tube, they fit in line with it, and this measures the amount of air flowing through the pipe at a given time. If I were to release this and it starts releasing air, it's going to emit a redstone signal. If I block it off, it will stop releasing air once all of the pressure has been equalized once again. Of course, when this is open, this pressure tube here is going to have low pressure, so there's a bit of a delay as to when the reader stops reading. Also, this one doesn't use the module expansion card. Next up is a regulator tube module. This limits the amount of air that can get sent through a given portion of tube. The blue end is the low end, and the not blue end is the high end. So this receiving a redstone signal of 14 is going to only allow 0.3 bars to get through the tube, as you can see here. If I were to change this signal and say move this lever back a bit, you'll notice that more pressure is now being allowed through because there's a higher amount of the redstone signal has changed. With a module expansion card, you guessed it, you can make this whole fancy configuration as to how it works. Lastly, we have the vacuum module. This works like a vacuum pump in that it takes all of the air and starts depressurizing it. The green end is the side with the positive pressure, the red side is the one with the negative pressure. Negative pressure is used for various things. For example, enchantment extraction, spawner extraction, and using things that require a vacuum like vacuum traps. You can even cool things down with air gray tube modules using the vacuum, as said before. Next, let's cover some of the miscellaneous items that PneumaticCraft has that we haven't discussed yet and don't really fit into any other category. First up, the gas lift. Let's place down the gas lift and put some drill pipes into it. When supplied with pressure, it will send drill pipes down until it hits the first available fluid. These pipes will drill through and use a pressure level that is proportional to the hardness of the block it broke. Once it hits a fluid, it will begin piping this fluid. You can then simply place any fluid inventory on top, though you will need some way of extracting that fluid, and a transfer gadget is a pretty easy way of doing that. Alternatively, you can use a dispenser upgrade. Crop supports can be placed down on farmland. They increase the growth speed at which a crop will grow. It will be denoted by green growth particles, much like you would see with bone meal. If you want to get rid of the crop support without removing the seeds, shift right click with the logistics configurator and it'll pop right off while leaving the crop intact. The elevator is a machine that will move entities up and down. To make one, place it down, then place down some elevator frames directly on top of it. You'll also want to put down some elevator collars if you plan on using it manually, placing them bottom to top to make sure it works properly. Once it's ready, stand on it, and provide it pressure, and click on one of the buttons on the elevator collar. It will take you to the floor of the level you picked, as long as that floor puts your head height at the height of the elevator collar. You can also go back down, of course, though this process is a little slow, so you might want to use some speed upgrades to make it faster. Elevators can go up to 8 blocks tall, so be wary that they don't have unlimited height. And you can also put them together to make double elevators that move you up very quickly and have more space. Do note though that each elevator base has a separate inventory for upgrades, so you'll want to make sure that you have the same number of speed upgrades in both, otherwise they will desync, as shown like this. And we don't want that, do we? Look how much longer that took. There's also a lot to talk about in the GUI of the elevator. First of all, you can change the name of any floor, so I can call this floor whatever I want, and I can call this floor whatever I want, and it will then render differently on the elevator collar. You can also choose to not use the elevator colors at all and control it with redstone instead. So if I wanted to say make it go all the way up, I'll give it a strong redstone signal, but if I don't want it to go very high up, I'll give it a relatively weak redstone signal. Redstone automation is better when you want to move around entities and not just yourself. You can also give it charging upgrades, which will allow it to reclaim some of the air that's lost if you want to be very pressure efficient. Other than that, this is a way of automating entity movement if you have a reason to do that. And remember that you can stick these together so long as the elevator frames are placed on both blocks and they are touching and adjacent. They'll share pressure with each other. You can also make the elevator base go way higher if you stack a bunch of them underneath each other. So for every one of these that I add, I can go back down and go back up. You can see how high it can go now. Look at this. Very big elevator. These elevators will share a space as long as there are elevator frames going to the same height upon both of them. And you can even use the Camouflage Applicator to hide anything you wish. The Kerosene Lamp will emit a very bright light. This light extends for a very large distance, and it can be configured within the lamp. It can use other fuels, but kerosene is the most efficient. It's also capable of lighting up to 30 blocks away, and nothing in this radius can have mobs spawn in it, so it's very good for lighting up your base. The Pneumatic Door will automatically open when players are next to it. You need to supply it with pressure in order for it to work. Place down some pneumatic doors and then place down some pneumatic door bases. Note that the pneumatic tube is going to have to face the door in order for it to function. So if I were to place down this compressor and then place down the pneumatic door base, I have to make sure that the way I'm facing is going to allow the door to open in this direction. Note that speed upgrades can be used to make it faster. As with other things from the mod, a camouflage applicator can be used to hide the pneumatic door base. The universal sensor can detect a large variety of different things. To use it, you'll need to install one of at least 3 of these upgrades, and some range upgrades if you want to access a block that's further away than your range. You'll also need a GPS tool to set the coordinates of the block you want to monitor. You could also set entity filters if that's what you're looking for, and that will be anywhere within the range of the universal sensor. Let's say I wanted to check the heat level of a block. Well, I could set the heat level to 500. Okay, this feels a little fiddly, but you need to make sure that there's no bar to let you edit the temperature. But yeah, once you put the GPS tool in and you manage the temperature of the block, you can see in the background there that the redstone turns on and off. There are too many things here to go over, but you can kind of get the gist of what each of them does just by reading it. It can even detect things in the world, like daylight, rain, or anything else really. It really is universal. The sentry gun will attack any entity within its range. You have to place down an entity and make sure you have the right filter if you want to filter it to only attack mobs. In this case, the @mob filter will allow it to only attack hostile mobs. You can hold down F1 to see the entire list of entities and how to add more things to the list. Be careful though, because you can make it attack players if you put in the player filter. As well as any other type of mob, it consumes any type of minigun ammo in order to damage things, and can be turned off with redstone if you so choose. The aerial interface is a wonderful block that allows you to connect to your inventory remotely. What it can do is manage your items and armor and such, and it will send pressure, power, end item and food and all these things without you having to be anywhere near it. So the best way to use this is to place it down next to some power and some pressure. It has to be pressurized to work, but with power it will automatically put energy into anything in your inventory that takes it. So for example, if I were to take this battery and put it into my inventory, it will automatically start filling it. If I wanted to do this with pressure, I would set it up slightly differently. First, I'll have to set up some tubes, and then put a charging module down. Then I can place down an aerial interface, and it will automatically be charging things in my armor slots. Oh, would you look at that? The armor is charging. I can also put in or extract items from my inventory. If I were to get out a hopper and put this redstone into this hopper, it will automatically put it back into my inventory because it's wirelessly sending it to me. Note that the player that plays down the aerial interface is the one that will be receiving the items. If I want to switch it to manage food, I can simply put in a dispenser upgrade. Now, it can take experience in food, and it has several different modes for feeding and managing your experience. It will even select which type of experience it takes from you and what fluid to output it as from which mod. If you look at the feeding modes, you can have it maximally use the food with most efficiency, feed you as soon as you're available to be eating, or use it smartly in that if you've taken damage, it will feed you, but not if you haven't. The vacuum pump creates a vacuum on the negative side of its output. So here we have the green plus and the red minus. We connect that to the pressure chamber, and we apply a compressor with a few positive bars of air. It will start spinning, and much like that inline tube module, it will create a vacuum inside the pressure chamber. Once a vacuum has been achieved, I'll just skip to when the vacuum has been created. And once you make it to when you actually get a vacuum, if I were to put an enchanted pickaxe or something in to the pressure chamber, as well as a book, it will begin it will wait until it reaches the minimum pressure required. Once the chamber reaches the minus 0.75 bars of pressure required, it will export the book with the enchantment from the pickaxe, and it will also export the pickaxe. Note that it only will extract enchantments one at a time, so you'll have to send it back through if you want to do more. The spawner agitator makes it so that a mob spawner will spawn mobs when you go away. It will also prevent these mobs from despawning. Now, because Apotheosis is in this mod pack, this actually doesn't work as intended. It will prevent the spawner from just working when you move away, as Apotheosis already has a way for you to do that. But in a regular setting with no Apotheosis, this would just allow mobs to spawn when you're nowhere near the spawner. The spawner extractor can be placed on top of a spawner and it will extract the core out of it. You'll need to apply a negative pressure, so a vacuum, into the extractor, and it will start spawning mobs at a greatly increased rate. It's going to take about a minute for the spawner to break once you place the extractor on and give it the vacuum. Note that you do have to actually kill the mobs in order to extract the spawner. You can't just sit here and expect it to work. The empty spawner will be used to make a pressurized spawner once we put a new core in it. Now, in order to use this broken spawner, we're going to need a spawner core. You can make an empty one if you didn't get one from the spawner by crafting it like this, and we're going to place it inside a vacuum trap. We can also put some experience into the vacuum trap from a memory stick. Now, we're going to make sure we have a vacuum for the trap. And if we place a mob on top of it and open the door, it will start sucking up the mobs and putting them into the spawner. You can even put different types of mobs into the spawner if you so choose. It will only suck up hostile mobs that normally spawned not from a spawner, passive mobs that are untamed, or other random mobs that don't have some type of special privilege or capability to them. Basically, it won't take away your pet dog. It won't take things that you grinded out from a regular spawner. And the more you spawn, eventually it will create a spawner core that can be used in the pressurized spawner. Also note that the memory essence that I put in is greatly increasing the efficiency of which it is trapping mobs. It's almost full here. Okay. Now we have a full spawner core. So we can make a pressurized spawner. And we can attach it to, well, some pressure. And we can put our new core into this new spawner. And it will spawn a mixture of zombies and skeletons, because that's what we put into it. You can see a skeleton here. And I'll speed it up a little bit. There's a zombie. Also, note when working with vacuums that you might want to use some volume upgrades to make sure that it can maintain that vacuum for longer. Because you saw how many mobs that took. It took quite a while for it to, fill it up. But yeah, this is the pressurized spawner. Alright, time for a lightning round of upgrades. We're going to start with the generic upgrades that affect mostly anything and machines, then we're going to go to armor upgrades, what all of those do, and then finally we're going to look at drone upgrades and what they can do, though I'll also be talking about drones right after this. First we have the speed upgrade. The speed upgrade makes anything faster. If it can go faster, it will go faster. That includes pumps, that includes crafting machines, that includes interfaces on the pressure chamber, that includes you when you're wearing pneumatic armor, that includes the transfer rate of various inventories, that includes basically anything you could think of. If you want it to go faster, it will go faster with a speed upgrade. Next we have the security upgrade. In most machines, the security upgrade will force the machine to automatically vent some air if it reaches a critical pressure threshold. This is particularly useful in air compressors, though you can also use it in pressure chambers and other things. It's an alternative to the safety tube module. You'll see there that it automatically vented a little bit of pressure to keep the pressure from getting too high. There are other uses for the security upgrade though. If you were to put it in the pneumatic helmet with conjunction with an entity tracker upgrade, you'll be able to hack mobs, and with a block tracker upgrade, you can hack blocks. A bunch of interesting features will happen when you use a hacking upgrade. If you hack wolves, it will force them to be tame. If you hack sheep, it will change the color of their wool. And if you hack villagers, it will force them to reset their trade stock. There are other things you can do with this upgrade, but there are too many to list, so I'm not going to go through all of them. The main point of this is that you can use the security upgrade to do some interesting things. Next we have the dispenser upgrade. The dispenser upgrade can be used to auto-eject items and fluids from one inventory to another. You can right-click on the side of a block to set the face you want it to eject to, and then put it in the target machine to have it start ejecting. Alternatively, you can place it in a fluid hopper, as stated before, and it will drop whatever fluid you want to put in it into the world. You can also put it in the aerial interface, as stated earlier in that section of the video, where it will change it from manipulating your items to manipulating food and experience. Some modules are just best talked about more than anything. The range upgrade is one such upgrade. What it does is it takes whatever function of a given machine or armor or whatever, and it makes the range higher. So let's say that you wanted to have a universal sensor sense something from further away, or you want an air cannon to hit a further target. You would use range upgrades for that. The volume upgrade is a useful one. Put it inside anything that can store pressure, and it will increase the volume of air that machine can hold. You'll notice that the effective volume is now different than the base volume. It basically takes this formula and applies it to whatever your machine is. But what this means is that the pressure formula now changes a bit, and it will allow more air to be stored, but it will also have an effect on the pressure. This allows that pressure to be buffered for longer, in that it takes longer to change the air pressure inside the machine, but that comes at the drawback of taking longer to fill the machine. But if you want to use less pressure per motion and affect the system less overall, a high volume can be very useful as long as you have the production to keep up with it. Now let's talk about all the generic armor upgrades, then we'll move to the more specialized ones for each piece of armor. To start, the armor upgrade. This increases the armor points of any drone or piece of pneumatic armor. You'll need more of them to increase the effectiveness up to diamond level, and you'll want to keep a lot of these on anything that's going to be doing fighting if you have guard drones or such. Next, the item life upgrade. This allows any piece of pneumatic armor or drone, or I guess the minigun apparently, to increase its durability as long as it has air pressure in it. It will consume the pressure and convert that back into durability. Useful if you have an aerial interface set up to keep your armor topped off. Then we have the radiation shielding upgrade. You'll need this in each piece of your equipment to make sure that it works, but it will protect you from mechanism radiation, much like the mecha suit or hazmat suit from Mechanism. Then we have the gilded upgrade. This functions like a piece of gold armor to piglins, so if you wanted to walk by them, they wouldn't be bothered by you. That does it for the generic things. There were only a few of them, but it's useful to know that they're there, especially because they're very useful ones, especially the first two. Now let's go over the helmet upgrades. The night vision upgrade is the simplest. It gives you night vision for some air. Yeah, that's about it. Next, the block tracker upgrade. This has use in some machines. You know, ones I've already talked about and kinda told you about, but yeah, it lets you track blocks. In the case of the pneumatic helmet, it will find inventories for you to look at. So if you're looting a dungeon, it might be helpful in that sense. Then we have the entity tracker upgrade. Basically the same deal. You can track entities, and you can also use it in the helmet to use that scouter effect you saw before when I was hacking things. Both of these are required to effectively use some of the other upgrades like the security upgrade and the item search upgrade. The Ender Visor upgrade allows you to look at Endermen without activating their anger. They stay neutral to you until you hit them. The Scuba upgrade uses air to give you air underwater. It lets you breathe. Note that you need the full pneumatic suit on for it to function properly. Then we have the item search upgrade. In conjunction with the block and entity upgrades, it lets you find items anywhere in your base if you set it within the filter inside its GUI. Note that you do have to turn some of these armor upgrades on for them to function properly. They don't necessarily function by default, especially because you might not want to be looking at all of those entity scanners at any given moment. You might want to turn it off, so get familiar with the upgrade inventory. It's you by default, and if you have upgrades installed, you'll be able to turn them on or off from the GUI. One upgrade for the pneumatic helmet that I missed was the coordinate tracker upgrade. This allows you to track a specific set of coordinates. What that means is it'll be like a waypoint. Yeah, it's not that useful if you have F3, but it's for people that don't like F3, so if you want to use it, go right ahead. Next we have the charging upgrade. When put in the pneumatic chest plate, it will charge items in your inventory that take pressure. Of course, you're going to need to have those items be at a lower pressure than the chest plate for it to work. Put in more to make it charge faster. You can also put it in an elevator base to make it reclaim some of the lost pressure from going up when it comes back down. Of course, this is best used with the aerial interface to make sure your armor is always topped off. Next we have the magnet upgrade. In most of these entities, it just puts the items that are dropped in the world in your inventory. You know, like any other magnet, it attracts things. In the case of the smart chest, if a side of the smart chest is set to pull items, and it has a magnet upgrade in it, it will automatically pick up items on the ground that are on that side of the smart chest. Finally, we have the Elytra upgrade. It's an Elytra upgrade. It gives you an Elytra. Easy, simple, nothing really to say. There aren't too many unique upgrades for legs, but there is the jumping upgrade. It makes you jump higher. Of course, there was also the speed upgrade, which allows you to run faster. If I put this in, you'll see that there weren't too many upgrades for this, and I've already talked about basically all of them. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about the creative upgrade. The final set of armor upgrades is for the boots. The muffler upgrade allows you to quiet down things that make noise, such as when you fall and hit the ground, and the boots make a noise when it blocks your fall. Then we have the flippers upgrade. It allows you to swim faster. Pretty simple. The stomp upgrade creates a shockwave when you land on the ground from a given height, assuming it's enabled. And then we have the jet boots. The jet boots allow you to fly. Note that all armor has to quote-unquote install before it's ready to go. But if I turn my jet boots on, it's a little awkward to get used to this, and you're definitely going to want to set up a hotkey. And I'm probably making some of you sick by flying around like this. But you can see how fast it is too. It's really crazy. Also note that speed upgrades will make the armor take less time to boot up when you put it on. You can see how much faster that is from the first time. That about does it for armor modules. Or upgrades, whatever. Now we have the drone upgrades. The first one is the standby upgrade. You could insert this into any of the drones that are specialized to a particular task. If it's not doing anything, it will automatically wait for you to go... If it's not doing anything, it will go into an idle position. This will save air because it's not having to fly. However, drones can take fall damage, so be careful. Next we have the minigun upgrade. You can put it into the programmable drone and the guard drone. It will allow the drone to start shooting entities that are nearby. Of course, you'll need to supply it with minigun ammo. Then we have the inventory upgrade. This will allow the drone to store more items in its inventory at a given time. It increases both item and fluid storage. Finally, we have the chunk loader upgrade. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It loads the chunk that the drone is in. Of course, you can also give drones range upgrades, magnet upgrades, and all that other stuff I discussed previously. Let's now go over the 4 types of drones that you can get without doing any programming. These all have somewhat simple crafting recipes. If I look at the pressureless version, you'll see it just takes some turbine rotors and some item in the middle. But we're here to talk about how these drones work. So let's go over each of them one at a time, starting with the logistics drone. To make your drones charge by themselves, make sure you have a charging station with the dispenser upgrade in it. Place your drone onto the charging station. Then we can make logistics requests using these logistics frames that we used before. Let's look at one with the logistics tool. This is a passive provider frame. Anything in this chest will be provided to the rest of the network. This is a requester frame. It's going to ask for something from the network to be sent to this inventory. This logistic drone will see this and it will fulfill the request so long as it is able to. So if I put this farmland in this chest, it will pick it up and put it in this one. This happens for pretty much any regular logistics request. It can take things out of a storage, it can put things away for you. It's quite handy. It's basically like having wireless pipes, but you know, a little drone guy is doing it and it needs a little bit of pressure. As for upgrades for these drones, you might want to give it speed and inventory upgrades, as it will be constantly delivering items from one place to another. The places the drone will look for items to take will be anywhere in a 33 by 33 by 33 area centered on this block that you placed it on. As long as this charging station is within that area, it will go find it. But in this case, I just placed it on the charging station. It won't exactly matter though. But yes, this is what would be considered its home. If I were to take the GPS tool, I could put it in a different location, and I could give it to this and give it a new home right here. This will change the area in which it's going to be working. Next we have the collector drone. Let's give it a home, and now it's attached to this inventory. When I go and throw items around the ground, it's going to find that there are items there, and it will go deliver them to the nearest inventory. Of course, it's going to be a little slow at doing this, but again, give it some speed upgrades and some inventory upgrades, and it'll do a fine job. There are also ways to have it both filter items and not filter items. If you shift right click it onto an inventory that has something in it, if I just get rid of this drone, if I shift right click, it's only going to be filtered to the things already in there, such as this farmland. If I were to drop some wheat seeds on the ground, it's not going to know what that is because it doesn't know to pick it up as it's not inside its filter. However, if I were to place down another collector drone, just wherever, it'll automatically pick up those items. If I were to place down the collector drone next to this inventory, it will pick up the seeds and go to this home, now that it has some seeds in it. Note that this does not retroactively update the filter of the collector drone that's already here. A harvesting drone will harvest crops in a nearby area around the location you set it on. Put a hoe in a chest, it needs one to work. Then shift right click with your harvesting drone. It'll pick up the hoe from the chest and get right to work. It will also replant the seeds. The collecting drones will do their job if necessary. Useful to have these drones together working. Finally, we have the guard drone. If we give it a weapon, it will take it out of the chest, and it'll start attacking things in the area. It has both melee capabilities and ranged capabilities if you give it a minigun upgrade. Remember that you need to have the upgrade though, and of course you're going to want to give it some armor, some health recovery, and the minigun upgrade. Okay, so programming drones. Let's place down our programmer and open the GUI. There's a lot here to take in, but for starters you're going to want some type of generic drone. This generic drone is programmable, unlike these other drones. You can't put this in the slot, it's not going to do anything, but if I want to put some other drone in the slot, it will work. So what I'm going to do is go through each of these pieces one at a time. You'll notice that there are 3 different difficulties for drone programming widgets. The easy one only shows the basic ones. Those are your basic break, start, stop, do it here, take an item, etc. All the stuff for you beginners to work with. Then we have medium. It gives us jumping and labels. More on that when I get to them. And then the advanced has variables and coordinates. So this is basically scratch programming in a way. If you know a bit basic computer language, you'll probably be fine, but we'll go over it and I'll help you through this. So I was thinking about the best way to handle this tutorial for the drone pieces, and I've come up with a solution. I've grouped all of the pieces up into different categories, and I'll be going over them categorically one at a time, instead of based on the order they're presented in the sidebar here. Oh, you can also click this button to open the panel, in case you want to look at everything all at once. I just think it's more useful to talk about some of these widgets before or after each other. It makes it a lot cleaner and easier to tell what exactly you're going to be doing, because I've already talked about all of these prerequisite widgets before I go over other ones that get a little bit more reliant on the ones that came before it. So there aren't actual groupings for these widgets. I just sorted them in ways that made sense to me to talk about them. So we're going to go over these groupings one at a time, and I'll be going over each widget in each group until we start getting to ones where everything is basically the same. Then I'm just going to go fast. But for the purposes of this video, let's start with the operational widgets. These are widgets that affect how the drone runs, or rather whether it's running or not, and just miscellaneous stuff. So the first one here is the comment widget. It does nothing, it's free, you don't have to use a puzzle piece to put it down. It's just your regular comment. There, comment, there you go, it says comment. The point of this is like in regular code where you / a line or something to make a comment. There you go, this is your comment. Next we have the start widget. Take a wild guess as to what that does. You need one start widget and exactly one start widget per drone program. The drone program will not work if you have 2 start widgets, nor will it work if you have 0. The start widget is the first thing that operates whenever anything initializes within the drone's programming. So everything comes from here. To use programs, it's going to read from top to bottom. So that's why the start is at the top and nothing can lead into it. Then we have the standby widget, sorry. This is a wait widget. It tells you to wait. It's like the standby upgrade, but in your code. You might want to wait for a particular condition to happen, or for a certain amount of time to pass. In cases like this, you can still allow the drone to get picked up while it's in standby. It will stop flying and stop using air pressure. It will wake up once it's, awoken by whatever task it has to be doing. Like if crops have grown or something. This widget, that I will not name, I don't know how YouTube likes that word, this widget tells the drone to stop functioning and turn into an item. Yeah, basically it tells the drone to break itself. But it drops, so it's not like it's actually broken. But yeah. Then we have the rename drone widget. It changes the name of the drone. Not too complicated. You can set the text to filter it, to tell it what to name itself to. This is the only time I'll be talking about something out of order. I am referencing a widget I have not talked about yet. But yeah, there you go. The rename drone widget renames the drone. I missed the wait widget before. The wait widget allows you to use a text module, or a text widget, to determine the amount of time you want a code to wait. So if I wanted to wait for 5 minutes, I do it like that. I could do 5 seconds, I could do 5 ticks. Plenty of configurability here. Alright, let's start talking about the information widgets. You might have noticed that the order they are in has been changed slightly. I decided to do that just to make it a little easier to go from one to the other. So let's start with the coordinate variable. You won't actually see this one in the Easy tab, but it's important to use because it tells information based off of a variable. You can manage coordinates if you'd like and determine them from a GPS, and it'll have those coordinates that the GPS was set to. Alternatively, you could use a variable name. Variables are something you can assign a value to. In like a math problem, you have like y equals 3x plus 2. Yeah, y and x are variables. So that's kind of what you're doing. And when variables are used, it uses that value in place of the variable when there are places the variable needs to be substituted. But in specific, this coordinate variable or widget supplies a specific variable to whatever code it is attached to. Then we have the area widget. The area widget takes an input argument of 1 or 2 coordinates. You can also use variables much like the coordinate widget. You can use 1 or 2 GPS coordinates, and if you only use 1, you can define a chest or a singular block that you wanted to work on, as opposed to a larger area, such as used for crop farms, quarries, and other things. You can also set this area to be any of these predetermined shapes. There are also separate operating parameters for determining the shape that you're going to be using. It can make the shape a grid, and it will have spaces between the grid. You know, a box makes just a box, and you can make it filled, the edges, or a hollow box. Though I guess a volume would be a better word, but it's the area widget. You can also preview the area in which this drone is going to operate. You're not going to see it here because I made these coordinates in the overworld and I am in the void dimension right now, but that's beside the point. The area is used to determine where a widget is going to operate. The text widget allows you to write some text. But you can also put other things in it. Say I wanted to make a filter for an attack widget that only attacks zombies. That's how you do it. The text is filtered to zombie. You can also use it for other things like the rename drone widget. You could say what you want to set the name to. But yeah, this is a useful widget for determining filtering and such. Then we have the item filter widget. The item filter can have a little JEI search in its own little GUI here, or you can search your inventory for an item and set the item filter that way. It will then put it in here, and you can also use different components about this. You can see if you want it to be uniquely that item if it has MBT data, or you could just have it universally accept it. In this case, this block does not have that, but if I were to pick a different one, like this sword, you'll see that, oh, it has item durability now. Also, if I do pick a block, you can see that it changes to the block state. The item components will look through enchantments and such to make sure that it matches in that regard. As well as, then we have mod ID. The mod ID tells it to take anything from that mod. So anything from PneumaticCraft, anything from vanilla, etc. And then block state. If blocks have multiple states, you can force it to match one particular state of the block. It also accepts variables, of course, like all these other informational widgets. Then we have the fluid filter. It's self-explanatory. I don't really need to say anything. It's a fluid filter. The fluid filter allows you to pick a fluid, and that becomes filtered. So those are all the main informational widgets. These are more so additions to all of our actor widgets, or action widgets, or I don't know, whatever you want to call them. We haven't gotten to those yet. We'll get to them in a moment. But yeah, these help you determine what exactly you're going to be using. Okay, so variable widgets. The item assignment widget can assign an item to a variable. If I name a variable, I now have this high variable, and if I stick an item over here onto this widget, it will now use this item under that variable name whenever the variable name is called. So if I were to have an item filter and I were to say, okay, I want you to look for items called high. Oh, well, this is an item called high. And if I had another filter with a different item and I also called it high, both of them would count under the high variable. So if I were to make a new filter for high, it would look for items that are called high, and it would have both of those items in it. Then we have the coordinate operator. This one is a little different than the others because it takes input and output arguments. What it's going to do is It can add, subtract, multiply, divide, or minimum or maximum, and save it to a variable. So if I were to run an input here, I would, and set it to say the min-max mode, it's going to minimize, you would put in two different coordinates, and it would min or max between those two coordinates, if that makes sense. Just to open up the page, because this one's a little more complicated than just having me explain it. To use, say, the add subtract widget in a practical application, if I were to put in two coordinates, one on each corner of my farm, and I wanted to count the number of times that code ran, or the number of blocks my drone traveled, I could subtract the two widgets and find the difference between them, and that would tell me exactly what the number of widgets is. Now, it would start at 0, so I believe you would just want one on the minus side and one on the plus side, but if I wanted to run a for each type of loop, I could just run it a set number of times. I could count those numbers and determine that ahead of time. Same with the multiplication and division. It's a math function. You probably know how math functions work on a basic level. It does the same thing. And then the min-max widget might look at some coordinates and determine which of the lowest or highest values there are between each of them. So if I wanted to save the lowest of x values and then save the highest of z values, I could do that just by making sure I put them on the correct side of the coordinate operator widget. And then that gets saved to a variable. I wouldn't necessarily call it hi. You can make a new one. Hello. There, now it's saved to hello. Okay, so let's go over the flow widgets next. The flow widgets determine the order in which code runs. These widgets allow you to set jump points and run subroutines, as well as skip to particular parts of your code if used in conjunction with conditions. To get started, let's talk about the label widget. The label widget is strictly a destination point for your other two main flow widgets. It tells the jump widgets where to send you. To set a label, you simply have to use a text widget. If I were to put this zombie widget here, and I were to put another zombie widget here, it would tell this label, this code to jump to this label and start the code from there. The jump subroutine widget is sort of similar to the jump widget, except it will just run the subroutine once, unless told otherwise, and it will then jump to that label, run the code, and then once it is done with the subroutine, it continues along on the block or the widget that is connected to its bottom side. Next up, we have the for each item widget. This goes in with the rest of the flow widgets. So what you could do with this one is set a bunch of item filters onto the side of this widget. You can have a whole list of them, and for each of those items, as the name implies, it will do a subroutine based off of the jump point that a text widget provides it. In this case, it would send it to that zombie label, as said before. This will do whatever subroutine is in that code using a different item each time in that filter. So if I wanted to take all cobblestone and then take all dirt, I could put a dirt filter and a cobblestone filter on, and it will run for each of them. If you want to run a filter and have it terminate early, you can use an empty filter, which would be assigned via an item assignment widget. But in general, you're going to be using this to go through lists of items. Finally, we have the for each coordinate widget. It's effectively the same thing as the for each item widget. You could supply it with an area, and it will go through each individual coordinate in that area, much like how I talked about it before with the coordinate operator. but this one will just go through each coordinate one at a time, and it will run the subroutine every time it reaches a new coordinate until it has finished. Note that when you are using these for each widgets, the subroutine is what's going to change the variables that you're using. You can, inside the subroutine, tell the code to stop early by setting the coordinate outside the world building height. If you do that, it will treat it as unreachable and it will terminate. This about does it for all of the non-action widgets except for condition widgets. I'll talk about condition widgets in a bit, but basically all of these are the same thing, just for different parameters. Next up, I will be going over all of these lovely action widgets, sorted in a better way than they are currently shown. The first action widget we'll discuss is the harvest widget. I'll basically be tackling these in a colored order, unless they are paired together like this. The harvest widget harvests crops. Remember the harvesting drone? It basically does the same thing, but with more parameters in case you want to do something a little more fancy than just harvest things. You can also right-click on it to change the order in which it does these things. You'll give it an area to work in, of course, but you'll tell it what the order it should harvest things in is. You can also force it to use a hoe in case you want to make sure you're mining your crops with fortune. Is it mining? Well, anyway, you can determine the order in which it harvests the crops. In this case, low to high isn't entirely applicable, but it is in case you have a multi-layer farm or something. Then we have limit interactions. This can force the code to terminate early if you so desire. It will tell the code that it can only run a certain number of times before terminating that harvesting widget. This doesn't mean it can't continue or run a subroutine again. It just means that, if my hoe has 50 durability, I'm going to want the harvesting widget to run 49 times, then go back and get a new hoe, or something. Wow, what a great way of phrasing that, huh? Well, anyway, that's the harvesting widget. The digging area widget is basically the same thing. It has all of the same, conditions, except for this click side widget, in which you might want to tell it to break from a particular side. If you tell it to break from one side or another, it might encourage the drone to go to a particular side to do the breaking, because of course you don't necessarily just want to quarry with this dig area. You could have it automate, say, living rock from Britannia, or something to that effect. And again, requires digging tool if you want to force it to use Silk Touch or Fortune, and limit the number of interactions if you wanted to go back and manage something between rounds of intervals. For both of these brown widgets, you can also use item filters. The item filters will determine what's allowed to be broken and what's not. In the case of the harvest widget, it will be the seed that determines what gets harvested. So if you're doing wheat, you would use seeds. But for something like carrots, it would just be carrots. You can also use the filter for mining in case you only want to break stone or the like for the digging drone. If you have a shovel drone and a pickaxe drone, you could give them separate filters. Now we have the entity attack widget. This tells the drone what area it's going to attack in and what entities it should attack by using a text widget. Hey, look, it's that zombie text widget that we had before. Oh, look, this entity attack widget is now filtered to only attack zombies. And of course, you can have it just patrol an area. You can also tell it to only attack a certain number of times. Determine if it can see the mob or not, which is important if you're going to be using the minigun upgrade or something. And of course, you're going to want to give it a weapon. So before this, you might want to give it a sword or something. And that goes for these widgets too. Of course, I've kind of alluded to that already. You want a hoe or a shovel or a pickaxe. You can also give it minigun ammo if it has the minigun upgrade, and it will attack with the minigun instead of the sword. If you are attacking with a drone, you'll of course want to give it armor and life upgrades, so that it doesn't die on you. The teleport to location and go to location widgets take an argument of an area. You could just use a single block and it will teleport the drone or move the drone to the given location. It uses 10 bars of pressure to teleport, so it's quite expensive. You want to make sure that you're not, killing your drone here. But yeah, you can also determine when it will go to that location. It can wait to go to that location, or it will try to go to the location and then execute the code. Partially useful for this teleport, if you wanted to. And yeah, it'll just continue after that, like nothing happened. Then we have the importing and exporting widgets. You can import or export these 4 different things. Of course, there's power, there's fluids, there's entities, and there's items. The sidedness does matter if you have an inventory that only accepts things from a particular side. Say the Applied Energy 6.2 inscriber before the update, where you could only put items in the top slot in the top and bottom slot in the bottom, and you could be picky like that and have the drone export to those slots specifically. Or you could have it do fluids, typical fluid stuff. Power, in case you want to set the inventory to only be push or pull from one side and you wanted to, take it or put it in on that side. And finally, the entity. You can pick up pretty much any entity that's not blacklisted, but mobs are going to be able to fight their way out. It's also useful for experience orbs if you set the filter to orb, and that orb filter will pick up the XP orbs in the area. All of this is in the book if you want to look at the filters, so you can don't necessarily need me to tell you what each individual filter is. This is just to say importing and exporting, typical operations that you will want to do when running various drone programs, as most things involve some type of item in some capacity. Next, we have picking up items and dropping items. Pick up items is effectively what the collector drone does. It goes around the area, it patrols it, you can filter it with item filters if you want, and it will, pick it up or not, if it's not the right filter. You can also drop items on the ground. Again, filter it. This pickup allows you to pick up items that are normally on top of a belt, as it says right there. But it can also be disabled if it's not, being managed by something. It's like how you could disable magnets with some items and mods in areas. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Then we have drop items. You can drop a specific number of items. You can also drop it random or straight. And what that means is that when you break a block, normally the item flies out in a random direction, right? If drop is set to straight, it'll act like a precision dropper, and it will drop it straight down with no variation. It won't have any chance to fall somewhere. And of course, you can have a delay on the pickup to prevent that item from getting picked up within 2 seconds. That's what 40 ticks means. So if you're running, say, actually Addition's empowered canola automation, you can set it to drop the empowered canola seed in the pool of crystallized canola oil, and it will prevent something from picking that seed up. And once it's ready, it will run that, and you can run other fluid pickups or whatever. Then we have void item and void fluid. Let's say you have a collector drone in your quarry. You want to void the stone. There, you can void the stone. Simple as that. Then we have void fluid. Same thing. If you're picking up fluids and you want to just empty it out, you can void it. Of course, be careful with this. Make sure your filters are set. You don't want to be voiding your diamonds now, do you? No, of course not. Now we have the emit redstone widget. Yes, this makes an entity emit redstone. Very weird, I know. You can determine which sides it emits redstone from if you want to only have it do it up. There's your option. You can emit redstone up, and you can use a text widget to determine the strength of the redstone that's going to be emitted. If you want more control over your logistics and you don't want to just use a logistics drone, you can use the logistics widget in a programmable drone's code. What this will do is it will allow for some more control over how the logistics drone, or the drone that you're using for logistics, works. You can define a specific area in which you wanted to do logistics requests. So if you don't like the regular area of going 17 blocks away from the point you place it at, you can not have to deal with that. You can also force it to go into standby mode if you run it with, different bits of code along the bottom side of it. Have it continue along. Next, we have the computer control widget. This allows you to import a ComputerCraft program into your drone. I'm not really going to go into that. ComputerCraft is not what this tutorial is about. Okay, are we done with that? Yeah, okay. Then, how about we go on to the external program widget. This widget will allow you to load in a memory stick into your drone and change the program that the drone is running as soon as it finds one valid memory stick in an inventory in the area it's looking. It's a little confusing, but basically it's going to look around in an area, and I'll open the page for this one. It's going to go around in the area you set it to. It will look through until it finds the first program, and then it will run the program and move on to the next slot until it, finds whatever program you're going to want to run with it. It also has these extra functions that you can read about here. It's running programs inside your programs. I know I crutch on the book a little, but I am trying my best to know exactly what these things do and how they work. There are a lot of widgets, believe me. Alright, edit sign widget. You can specify an area. It will go around to all signs in the world, and it will set the aphorism tiles or signs text to the text you specify with the text filter. I shouldn't have to show this anymore. You've seen it a billion times. Me just put that thing there. Next up, the crafting widget. The crafting widget takes item filters as an input. If I were to search for, say, diamond in this and set the filter to diamond, and then I can middle click to copy diamond, and then I could get more item filters and get one for sticks. I can use these filters to make a valid crafting pattern that it will try to craft things with. You're going to need storage upgrades in your drone in order for this to work properly, as it can only hold one type of item at a time by default. So by having more slots, it'll be able to hold diamonds, sticks, and diamond pickaxes. Oh, this is the stickiest stick. Okay, well, you get the point here. This is how you craft with drones. You could have it resupply itself on mining equipment. You could have it just be an auto crafter, I suppose. It has applications. You can also right click on it and set the count of number of items you wanted to craft before moving on. So if you wanted to craft 3 pickaxes and then just keep running and then make 3 again later, there you go. Next, we have the place widget. The place widget places blocks. Set the block filters by using item filters. Set the area using an area filter. Right click on it and you can determine the order it operates in, just like the dig one. You can also have it place blocks randomly from its inventory, kind of like the Quark trowel or something to that effect if you want to have random textures in your walls. Again, like before, you can limit the number of interactions it does, so you could say place 50 blocks, then come back for more. Next up, we have right-click Entity widget. You can right-click on a given entity using a filter for the entity with a text widget, and you could use an area widget to determine the area it's going to operate in. For example, you could use this for a sheep farm, for wool. You could have the drone take a shear from an inventory, and then have it go around the sheep farm, shearing all of the sheep. And you would use this widget to right-click on the sheep. And there's no advanced stuff for this. Finally, we have the right-click widget. This is going to right-click on a block. You can tell it what side to right-click on. That might be important depending on what you're using it for. You can also sneak right click on something, kind of just like any other clicker in any other mod. You can also have it, click on blocks in a given, same order stuff that the other widgets with the order thing had. And you can also tell it to click the item that it's using or click on the block itself. So let's say I wanted to use a flint and steel. That would be click the item, like it says there. And I mean, you could read the example. The lever would be for a clicking on the block type thing. That covers all of the action widgets. There are a lot of them, but they're useful and they're all simple tasks on their own that can be combined for a larger program. Being puzzle pieces, like using puzzle pieces to make this, is very fitting of an analogy, but that's really what you're doing. You're just stringing together a bunch of actions, and you're going to tell it to do things under given circumstances. Finally, we get to all of the condition widgets. I'm missing one of them. I can't tell which one I'm missing, but the general point of all of them is basically the same. You're going to say that if condition is true, jump to the widget, label widget that is listed here. So remember zombie, our good buddy, the zombie widget. Yeah, there you go. So when we run, say, a coordinate widget, we're going to check the coordinate and we're going to see if one coordinate is greater or less than or equal to another coordinate. By running this comparison, if it's true, it will do the jump and run maybe a subroutine or something. If it's not true, it will just skip it and move on. So let's say you wanted to check if you wanted to stop your drone from operating beneath Y0. You could say that, oh, I want to check this current position widget and see if it's under Y0, and if it is, go back up to the surface or something. The item widget is just going to check an item to make sure it matches a filter. The area will tell it what area it's supposed to be looking in. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about the jump command because it's virtually the same every time. In any case, the item widget is going to be looking through an inventory in a given area and counting the number of whatever is in it. So let's say I have running a cobblestone generator program or something, and I'm breaking cobblestone. I could tell it to stop if the chest that it's putting it in has more than 1,000 cobblestone. If it's greater than or equal to 1,000 cobblestone, stop, and you can also run it off of a variable if you so desire. Next, we have the item condition, which is for the drone. Instead of going off of an external inventory, it checks the drone's internal inventory. And you set your filter, you set your count, and yeah, it will run this jump if it has more than a particular number of items in it. You can also leave the item filter empty for both of these, and it will instead just count all the items, so you can determine if your drone is full or something to that effect. The pressure widget determines the pressure of the block in question. And I guess the drone condition for pressure is basically the same thing. You will be looking at the given network or block and determining if the pressure is above or below or equal to a particular threshold. Then we have the block condition. The block condition will act as a type of sensor for a given block space. So if I wanted to check if a block is cobblestone, it will run this code if the block is cobblestone, and it will run over the given area you tell it to. Then we have the RF condition. It determines how much energy is in a block or how much energy is in the drone, if the drone is carrying energy. The light level upgrade will look, or in condition, will look at the light level of a given block space. If the light level is more or less than something, it will, it will run the code. Then we have the upgrade condition. It will determine if a particular drone, if the drone has a particular upgrade or not. There you go. The redstone condition will look for a redstone signal in a given area. The area is usually a single block, or maybe it's multiple blocks and you're running some fancy logic. Then we have the item filter condition. The item filter condition will run for an item filter, and you need to attach item filters in order for it to work. It will affect the flow if it finds the item it wants to find. Then we have the fluid condition. Guess what? It checks the inventory of the drone to determine if it has a given fluid in it. Ooh. Finally, we have the entity conditions. They determine if an entity is in a given area. Say it will stop your cow farm from it will stop feeding your cows if you have over a certain number of cows in your cow pen. And the drone condition entity will run based off of if it is holding a mob at that given time. And of course, you're setting that filter with a text filter. There we go. That's all of the drone conditions. I'm just doing one last look through to see if I can figure out who the guy that's missing is. Oh, I think it was just a regular fluid condition. Yeah, it was. Well, do I need to explain this? Look for fluid, determine information based on it. Basically the same as the block thing. So, that was a lot of widgets. And I still have yet to go over how to actually use these things. I just told you what each of these widgets are and what it is and a general idea of what it's for. Fun! There are just a few other things about drones to talk about though before I start finishing things up. And I will be going over the security network before I do any of my examples, drones included. The GPS tool, as I've talked about before, allows you to save coordinates of a singular block. It's useful for determining where a drone is going to operate. The GPS area tool will instead allow you to move the area of the GPS, and you can set 2 coordinates anywhere you like. And, you can shift right click to switch between point 1 and point 2. The network API saves the drone program to it. So if I just have this junk program, I can write the program to the network API, and I can load it elsewhere if I so desire. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention each of these programming tables. They each store the program inside it separately, and I can load this if I so desire, if I want to edit it for whatever reason. Finally, we have the programmable controller. So what this does is you can place a drone inside of the programmable controller, and if it has enough pressure, it will run a drone program without a drone. So if I were to run a this whatever program, it'll send out this ghost drone, and it will start doing things, and the drone has no collision or anything. So yeah, it's working without risk of losing a drone. I mean, I made a simple program for testing purposes. So, and yeah, so, and if you take it out, the ghost drone goes back into the programmable controller. It's also it won't have any entity routing or anything because it's not a real entity. It's just like a ghost entity. So it might be nicer on servers to use the programmable controller, especially if you have a lot of drones and drone paraphernalia running around your base. Alright, so the last thing to talk about before I get into all the automations and drones and all that nonsense is the security station. So this protects an area. It prevents other players from messing with your stuff. Yeah, there's this thing called chunk claims that kind of makes it obsolete, but I appreciate having a mechanic like this. I mean, look at it this way. They have the Manometer. With most mod packs, that's useless too, but it's still here. And I don't mean to shame them for having this feature either. It's a relic of a time, and it's also just sometimes you want to have a mechanic like this. I get it. Anyway, to get started with this thing, you'll notice that it doesn't protect a very large area. You're going to want some range upgrades to increase the size of the area that it protects. And you might also want some security upgrades, maybe like a whole crap load of them, because it's time to get into the topic of hacking. So the security station needs to be made with this type of grid. You're going to want to make a long path of these network nodes connecting your network I/O port, the network registry, and the diagnostic subroutine. So based off what the book says, the goal when hacking, first you're going to need a pneumatic helmet with a hacking upgrade, and you're going to need a whole bunch of security upgrades in your helmet to bypass the security measures of the security station. And so yeah, the hacker starts at the network I/O port. Their goal is to get to the network registry and take it down, or get to the diagnostic subroutine and take that down. There's a little battle that's going to go on, and you're going to have the hacker hack their way towards one of these vulnerable positions. The diagnostic subroutine is going to fight back. It can catch the hacker and close off their exit point, and you like kind of move in the direction that you're trying to attack. It's weird. And then you can also put more extra nodes in here to fortify these paths to make it harder for the hacker to get in and hack it. You can let players into your security station so that they're not affected by this, and you're probably going to want to have some external defenses around this thing too, you know, drones that protect you, or turrets, or something of that nature. But yeah, pretty much you're going to be fighting each other. And then if I wanted to like test this, so you know, you got to start at this network I/O port, and you got to keep moving along. You're going to start hacking nodes, and you also have nuke viruses and stopworms. The nuke virus is going to like do a lot of heavy damage to a network node. It will instantly capture it and take it down, and then the stopworm will prevent the it will temporarily freeze the diagnostic subroutine. So yeah, your goal is to get as far as you can and capture all of these nodes and prevent them their red line from blocking off your green line. Note that it does take longer for the network nodes to get you, but yeah, basically you're trying to get to this point before this gets to your path, and it won't detect you until you start like taking nodes. And a better setup would have a lot of more nodes to make a more complex path, to make it more difficult for you to get to the network registry. You can also fortify ports to like make it harder for the diagnostic subroutine to track you and such. But yeah, it's trying to get to here, and you're trying to get to one of these points. But if I take this, it's all over. Also, these things can't be crafted. You have to find them in loot. So remember that. You can also have more than one security station, like protecting an area. So like, oh, now I have to break both of these security stations in order for that to work. And I can also use a remote and bind it to the security station. And if I'm away... Oh. So yeah, you can bind this to your security station, and you can use it to control your sensors and create a whole separate GUI. It lets you do some junk. I guess if you wanted to remotely edit your drones, you could do that. Just as a quick demonstration of how to use the remote. So if I shift right click on this, if I just right click on this sensor, and I go to world, I click the dispenser, world, global variable, I set the variable to signal 1. I can shift right click with this remote. Now I downloaded some code from Pastebin. You can get it from the book. But basically this is just a text channel and it has a variable name. And yeah, so whenever I go into the regular remote GUI and click the button. Oh, and I have to have it set here. It will detect that the variable is on, and it will activate the redstone. So you could like turn things on or off remotely. You could turn the lights on when you enter your base. I don't know, whatever you want to do. Yeah, that's basically what the remote does. Just a real brief demo. Alright, so here is a system where we have automated production of air pressure. I have a pressure gauge 2 module reading the pressure inside the system. And I also have a whole bunch of redstone turning off these compressors when this gauge reads over 3.5 bars. I picked this number because if I'm just using regular old coal, it's still going to finish burning whatever it was in the middle of burning. It's not just going to stop. I have them set to low redstone, but once they run out of fuel, they'll stop. This will put it somewhere between 4 bars and 4.5 bars. And it won't start up again until it goes under 3.5 bars. So for a simple early system like this, this will work. But you might want to use something a little better next time. Oh, oops. Well, yeah. You're going to want to use better things in the late game, other than coal. If you want to use liquid, I believe that'll be a little more efficient. So, and you can also use pipes instead of this weird hopper thing. So there's that. So while basic setups are great and all, I know you want something a little more advanced. So this is an automation for the advanced liquid compressor to keep it cooled and producing pressure, with a good number of speed upgrades in it as well. In order for this to work, I have a pressure gauge tube module with a module expansion card that only emits redstone when the pressure is above 15 bars. Then that is turning off the compressor once it is above that threshold, and I have some heat sinks removing excess heat from the compressor. To assist with that, I have some air grate tube modules on a vacuum network, thanks to this vacuum tube module. And this is allowing the hot air to be sucked into these tubes and cooling down these heat sinks so that it is able to keep a pretty low temperature. Now, I don't know if it holds 5 comfortably. I tested it with 4 and it worked. 5, it like kind of worked, but this, it would be producing 300 milliliters of air per tick, which is much higher than a base 50, and way higher than the 10 or 20 you would get from one of those. And then beyond that, of course, we have to be able to use this pressure for something, not just make a self-powering system that burns fuel. So I have a comparator here with a signal of 4 on this regulator module. Of course, you could use a module expansion card to expand the redstone threshold, but this is a simple way of doing it to make sure that 3.6 bars of pressure are getting through and into this pressure chamber. And because this is buffered to such a high pressure on this side, this will maintain a fairly consistent pressure because it will always be able to get more air through the regulator that's keeping it in check. But yeah, this is a pretty okay setup. You know, you can always expand it by adding more of these compressors, and you'll need to make sure you have more air grate tube modules. These do benefit, these heat sinks, they benefit from having more than one air grate tube module, so that's why I have 4 of them. But yeah, you can cover it on all sides if you want, and of course you're going to want to fuel it. I left space on the bottom so you could automatically put fuel in. But yeah, this is a way of automating an advanced liquid compressor. I'm not going to go over every single compressor, but there are other things to go over. So yeah, this is just an idea for how to get started with your higher end pressure generation. So let's say you wanted to automate compressed iron or something in this pressure chamber. I made a little network here to accomplish that. If I set this omnidirectional hopper to be redstone sensitive, I can limit how much iron gets sent into the network at a given time. It will fill this chest, but if it's full on compressed iron, it will disable any more from going in. Of course, it's going to need to make sure it has a high enough pressure. If you run things quick enough, you're going to want to have to buffer it a lot more. But if you want to keep a high volume for crafting, you can always use volume upgrades, and it'll completely kill the pressure, but it'll store so much more air. Look at that. That's 10 times as much air. So that means it'll take 10 times longer for it to fill, but it will also take 10 times longer for it to deplete. You know, just a little automated compressed iron crafting setup. Self-turning off. Just a logistics drone. Okay, so this mess is me just doing a silly thing because I can and because I wanted to prove that it was possible. So, this giant mess is automation of empty printed circuit boards using only the logistics network. And you can see everything going online. And what this system is doing is it's making sure that nothing is, how I should say, it's making sure that I put in an even number of items into the pressure chamber at a given time, assuming that the stock of these items isn't always constant. And it will turn off on its own when it fills up this inventory with enough items. Yeah, this is absolutely insane, unhinged behavior, I know. So how does this thing work? Well, for starters, we have the logistics network. I have requester frames for each component of the recipe I want to make. And then I have a redstone control on each of these hatches so that they only accept items if there's stock in the chests and there's not too many items in the chests, that the output chest. This makes sure that I don't craft too many and that it doesn't end up disproportionately filling the pressure chamber, because otherwise it would clog. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this. This was just me doing it for fun. And just to show you that it's possible. Next, I'm going to be doing it with Applied Energistics, and it's probably going to look infinitely simpler and easier. The only reason I'm bringing AE2 into this video is because this is the practical section of the video, and nothing says practical like other mods you'll see commonly in the same mod pack. Okay, just because I want to mention it, I did fix the logic a little. There was a logic error in that if some of this wasn't filled out, then it wasn't actually doing its job properly. But I have since fixed that issue, and everything should be good to go. Alright, I just had to make a little bit of a change here. The pressure chamber valve here is also going to feed the pressure system when the pressure chamber refills, because I had to break it. But yeah, I know how this is overcomplicated and you don't need to see this. I promise now. There, Applied Energistics time. I just wanted to verify myself, I suppose. So, you want to automate this with Applied Energistics, huh? Well, it's actually quite easy. All we have to do is get ourselves a basic ME setup, you know, crafting, storage, energy, drive, whatever. The important part here is we have the pattern provider connected to a smart chest or any other buffer storage that can export. I just picked this because it works. And then we have the pressure chamber interface and an import bus to take crafted items back into the system. Now, instead of PCBs, I decided to go with capacitors. It's just easier to use these. And I've already made the pattern for it and put it in. And so it's going to try to craft these one at a time, because this recipe is only one capacitor at a time, and I turn blocking mode on. Blocking mode will prevent the pattern provider from sending extra inputs into the smart chest. This is so you don't overfill it on one ingredient if you make an extra large order. If you're only making small orders, it won't matter, but if you're requesting like 1,000 of these at a time, the pressure chamber won't be able to hold all of those items, and so blocking mold will prevent that from being an issue. However, what I should really be doing is putting this back in the pattern encoder, like so, and I'm going to raise this up to 16 plastic, and then this will make 16 capacitors. So if I resave this, it's going to now instead make much larger batches as soon as the request, if I cancel it and make a new request, it will now instead put larger shipments in, and we can use some speed upgrades to increase the transfer rate here. But yeah, the point here is we're crafting much quicker, and we have much less of a problem if overflow were to happen. You might also want to just make a separate interface for each of these recipes, but this does the job. Yeah, I don't know why I said that. Just do it, but like this, and make large pattern recipes. I think it'll be good. Alright, are you ready for something super simple? Feast your eyes. So, for 1 bar of pressure, I have a vortex tube and a heatsink. I have the thermopneumatic processing plant, again with those creative inputs. And then I have this one liquid hopper. Guess what it does? Guess what it's going to do once I put this in? There. We're making plastic. Yup, it's this simple. If you want to automate plastic sheets, this is all you really need. I don't even know why I built that. Why did I build this junk? I don't know. It was kind of pointless and excessive. So yeah, this runs on 1 bar of pressure. You know, I'm going to scrap the clip with this in it. I'm just going to tell you that this regulator tube module can restrict the amount of pressure going to a vortex tube. So if you want to keep it only running at 1 bar, you set this redstone signal to 12. And now this will only allow 1 bar of pressure through. Just to go over this, redstone modules can go on pressure tubes and don't need pressure in order to work. But yeah, this is all you need to automate plastic. It's actually kind of crazy how easy it is. I mean, you know, obviously you got to source it with whatever ingredients you're going to be using, but you get the point. Alright, like with the pressure chamber, I'm going to show you a way to do this with just PneumaticCraft and then with other mods. So, here's just PneumaticCraft and vanilla, I guess, but you kind of assume that. So, what are we doing? Well, if you recall, I said that we have to make sure that the water source is new when yeast transforms a water block into another yeast. So, in order to deal with that, I have a system that deploys a sugar, and then as soon as this entity, a universal sensor, detects that there's a sugar entity in this block space, it fires this orange pulse, and that allows the piston to retract for a bit. And this block is effectively acting as a refresh for the water. So this is telling the system, okay, we're going to release an item on a clock, and it's going to go every 5 seconds. And it doesn't seem to work every time, but it works enough of the time. So it drops a sugar into that block, and then this detects that there's a sugar there. That sends a signal up to here, and this is a very jank signal extender that I added in. It makes sure that the piston retracts for long enough for the sugar to transform the water. But this part seems to work every time, so that's good. You're not wasting sugar. And yeah, then we have a fluid hopper here with a dispenser upgrade. It's picking up the yeast culture on top. It's set to filter mode, so it's always leaving a bucket of yeast in this hopper, and then it's sending it to this huge fluid tank, and you can use that to make biodiesel or whatever. So yeah, it's not that complicated. I'll just give it a quick little fly around if you want to copy it for whatever reason. Here, these are on just send orange. This is on a clock. This has to be a separate color than whatever color you're using for the sensor, otherwise it won't work. And yeah, you can't have a redstone signal in or the clock gets disabled. But yeah, pretty simple setup, relatively speaking. Alright, let's get on to something even simpler though. Alright, for some reason it didn't want to automate this stuff in the Void World, but this isn't a tutorial about how to do things in the Void World, it's a tutorial on how to automate things in PneumaticCraft. So, we have a bunch of things from Just Dire Things, makes this really easy. This loop is only here to keep refreshing the yeast culture so that the system doesn't get stuck and the yeast flow won't be a problem for the sugar. It seems to always keep one sugar here, but that's fine. It works. So, anyway, what we're doing here is, this is just constantly redeploying that yeast. And this is, constantly placing down water based on this redstone timer. Well, I guess it's not constant then, but yeah. This places a sugar, then it places a water, and, it makes sure that, this keeps going. You can disable this based off of the stock of the yeast culture on the redstone clock if you want. You know, if you fill up, you can have these automatically shut off. That's probably useful. And then obviously they're just creatively powered, but you know, you're going to power that with regular power. These all have a lot of offsets, and they're all set to pulse, except for this fluid placer, because this is only supposed to be running so much at a time. You can also probably get away with extending the timer on the yeast culture, because it's really just here to stop the flow. This gets rid of all that piston stuff. And, yeah, everything is filtered. You know, it's pretty self-explanatory once you, like, start doing it, but you can see everything is laid out. This is only, this is going to constantly place water. This is going to constantly deploy sugar. Well, again, constantly means based on the redstone clock. And, this is going to constantly pick up the yeast culture whenever it's, you know, available. But, yeah. Pretty simple system, not too many components involved, and you can definitely clean this up more. I tend to favor having a larger sprawl to ensure that it's clearer to see every component over making something that's neat and compact for the sake of these tutorials. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, obviously. One other thing I can show off here is a basic sorting system. So if we look at each of these storage frames, you'll see that they're all filtered to a particular mod, as designated here. If I were to put my entire inventory into this chest, it'll start sorting through the items, assuming everything has a home. And if it doesn't have a home, it ends up in this chest on the end. But everything from PneumaticCraft went in here. Everything from Mechanism went in here, even though it's not the item that is present in the filter. You can see I put a crusher in the filter, but these are cables, but it still recognized it. Vanilla stuff, all wound up in here. And iron furnaces stuff, all wound up in here. Pretty handy. Though, obviously you will need some pressure to make this work, but, you know, that's just kind of par for the course with this mod. Okay, so all that other automation was great and all, but I know what you really want to see, and that's drones. Well, I have a code for you. So, I'm going to go over this code, but first, let's see what it does. Alright, it went to the chest, and it's digging stone, and then it's going to pick it up, and it's going to dig some more stone, and then it's going to pick it up. Now, this is a very simple quarrying drone, and it's going to keep on digging, and digging, and digging, till it's finished. It's mining with a diamond-tipped jackhammer. I put the jackhammer in this chest, it comes picked it up, and then it goes and does the digging that it wants to do. Now, you could have it pick up blocks after every break. It's probably best to do that, because then you have the lowest chance of losing an item to lava. You know, that's one issue that this drone has. And you'll have to make more advanced code blocks in order to address when things like that occur. But for a basic early quarry, this is okay. It does the job. It's probably not as good as your traditional Buildcraft style quarry. But, you know, it does what it needs to. Also do note that this is a drone itself. This is not something from the programmable controller, so it still has to route to all of these blocks when it breaks them and picks them up. Otherwise, that nice little ghost drone could just go through everything, and that would be that. And yeah, anything outside of its range is going to inevitably just not get picked up, but that's just how it is. I could place down more blocks if I wanted. And I also gave it a limited area, so it's not going to be breaking too many things. But once the drone is ready, and you can see a little tidbit of the area that it's digging in. Once it's done, it's going to deliver its haul over into this chest. I believe I set it to 2 stacks of items, so once it picks up 2 stacks worth of stuff, it's going to come up here, and I'll just cut to when that happens. Okay, so I've dropped some items on the ground, and this drone is going to go to this chest, it's going to pick up a jackhammer, and it's going to start digging. Then it'll pick up all of the items. It'll notice that it has a full inventory of 2 items, 2 stacks of items, and it will deliver it to this chest. It will keep doing this every time it reaches 2 stacks of items in its inventory, or 128 individual items. Of course, it won't drop off the jackhammer. I have configured it. That was something I fixed in the code, that it does not drop the jackhammer off. But yeah, this drone is doing its job, and also, because I'm wearing the pneumatic helmet with the entity tracker upgrade, I can see what step of the process it's on. In this case, it's just going to be on the dig loop for the most part, you know, because it's digging. But yeah, that's basically how this drone functions. It's a small quarry drone, very useful. Alright, so I'm going to explain how this code works, but I'm going to preface this by saying if you're doing something like quarrying, it's better to just use the programmable controller if you can. If you put a magnet upgrade in this, the drone program it will run won't require the pickup part of this code, and it'll run faster because of it. But because I'm trying to start you off with a beginner code, we're just going to look at this one and go over how it works. So all the pieces are here. It's a functional program, and it will quarry in the area. Obviously, you'll have to set the area to go much deeper if you want it to go to bedrock or whatever. But so the program starts at the start, you know, as you would expect, start of the program. Oh, also, if you want to move code around, codes will attach all codes on their right, all widgets on their right and underside if you pick one up, but it will not attach anything on top. So that's how you move things around without breaking them, and how to split specific parts of your code into different pieces. And yeah, so it starts by picking up from the inventory. It goes to this area. That area is this chest. This chest that contains a pneumatic jackhammer. It goes and, oh, okay, I need to pick up a pneumatic jackhammer from that chest. Got it. And it picks it up. If you didn't have a filter, it would pick up everything in that chest. You can also restrict it in ways, like you could make sure it only picks one up, which might be helpful if you have a chest full of multiple pickaxes or something. And then it will jump to the dig loop section of the code. That's the subroutine we want it to run. And this is the dig loop subroutine, because this is where it's titled dig loop. It goes to this label, and it says, okay, let's start from here. And then it goes from high to low. So it's going to go for the highest block that it can possibly mine within the selected area that we've given it via some GPS tools. And you could see it, you could preview the area. There you go. It'll show you what it looks like. I've also made it require a digging tool, like, you know, the jackhammer. And it's going to mine in this area. If you want, you could filter it to only mine specific types of blocks, like you could blacklist all of the stone or whatever if you want. You can also blacklist the ores if you don't want to risk them going into lava or anything, and you can just use your pickaxe on them later in the empty quarry hole. So the code's going to start at this dig area command, and it's going to dig in this selected area. If I wanted to whitelist or blacklist certain blocks, I could do so. And then every time it runs this dig command, it's only going to dig one block because I've limited it, and it's going to pick up items. So once again, it's going to check the area and pick up any items it finds. And you can whitelist or blacklist, as said before. Remember, right side is whitelist, left side is blacklist. And yeah, this is the basic functionality of this inner loop, and it's going to keep doing that unless it runs out of pressure or whatever, and then it's going to go to the charger. That happens automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. Alright, next we have the condition. So this is what it will happen. It will check the inventory to see if the code, or if the drone's inventory has has too many items for it to keep going. So if it has more than 2 stacks of item, it's gonna go over to the storage and drop everything off. And if it's not over that threshold, it's going to go back to the beginning of the loop, because we set this to dig loop, we set that to dig loop. This is the destination. You can only have one of these dig loops, but you can have as many of these on the bottom as you want. See, I have 3 of them, because everything runs back into the main loop, and you just want the quarry code to run over and over until it finishes. So yeah, this is going to send it to storage if it has more than that, and it arrives at storage. Okay, we're going to export to an inventory. Where's the inventory? Well, I've designated the area. If you want multiple inventories, you could just make the area bigger, and it'll drop it off in any chest it finds in that area. But in this case, I've set it to a specific coordinate to only put it in one chest. And yeah. Oh, and also, it's blacklisted the jackhammer, so it cannot put the jackhammer in the chest where it's putting all of its haul. So yeah, this is the basics of a quarry code. I'm going to clean this up to make something more suitable for the programmable controller, so I'll be right back. So I've pruned the code a bit, and you can see I pretty much just removed that widget that was collecting items, because you can use the programmable controller with some magnet upgrades to have it automatically pick up items, and you don't have to worry about that. And so this drone has been mining out the area, and it'll keep going until it's done with the area that I gave it. Now, because I've used the programmable controller, the water makes no difference. You might have problems with fluids like water, lava, and oil if you are using a regular drone. And of course, you will also have to supply the controller with sufficient pressure, but yeah, you don't need that magnet upgrade anymore. Everything else is pretty much the same. If you want, I can go through this and just show you my settings. Most of it's stuff that I've basically already explained, but if you want any one of these tidbits, you can pause the video. Of course, you can play with any settings, like you could have it come back later to drop off its items if you shrink the, or if you raise the size of items here that it would activate the condition for. And if you want, a larger storage area, you can do that with more chests. And again, we have this Pneumatic Jackhammer filter that's blacklisted because it's on the left side of the widget. And yes, you might want some extra termination code at the end, but because we're using the controller, we actually don't really need to worry about retrieving the drone or anything like that. If we are using a regular drone in the world, then yeah, obviously we're going to need to get the drone back up here before we do anything else. You could also add some extra widgets, like something you could add if you want is the void item widget. So if I were to find a void item widget and like attach a filter here for say cobblestone, I would probably put it here. So if it picks up cobblestone, you could add like dirt and stuff, and then this would just void everything that's void all the cobblestone. Or you could have it void everything that's not an important resource, but for a pack with a lot of ores like this, like Evolution, I would recommend just whitelisting what you're voiding, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Because you'd also have to make sure you're not voiding the jackhammer, or whatever tool you're using. If you want other tools, there are plenty of other options. Like you could use a dire things pickaxe or something, and you could drop it off at an inventory that it can charge energy from. But yeah, this works fine with the pressure. because, you know, sticking with PneumaticCraft as much as possible here. And, oh yeah, you might also want to have something to collect XP perhaps, but yeah, the point here is that we have a drone and it works. So here is a code that's going to farm cows. Let's make sure it has everything it needs. Put down this drone and it's going to get to work. It's going to get some wheat. It's going to breed these cows. Then it's going to get some buckets and milk them. It's going to drop those buckets off in that hopper. And that will take care of the milk and store it as a fluid. We're going to switch to the kill routine. And it's going to kill 2 cows, but it's going to wait to make sure that the attack cooldown doesn't reduce the damage. Then it's going to pick everything up and drop the items off in here and the fluid off in this liquid hopper. Now it's going to be waiting. Now I probably should have made a separate wait routine so that you know it's waiting, but yeah, it's doing its job. You might want to expand the area to the edges just to make sure it gets any missing XP orbs or items. But for the most part, this is pretty functional code. Yeah, you know what? It will look nicer if I just move this over one. So we're just going to there, we're going to call that wait, and there. Now this is going to be the true end of the code. But yeah, let's start from the beginning, shall we? Alright, we have the start command. We jump to wheat, and you'll notice everything is in a separate block. This labels each subroutine so that we know what part of the code it's doing when we troubleshoot. It's much easier to dissect our code when it's in a separate subroutine because it tells you, oh, it's in the cleanup routine. Now, again, this would be the wait routine if it were actually, you know, done properly. But, yeah. And it's going to wait 5 minutes because the cows have to wait 5 minutes to breed again, of course. So, let's look at each of these pieces one at a time. We start with the wheat. It goes to the chest, or the bed drawer that has the wheat in it. It picks up the wheat. Then, for each wheat in its inventory, you know, we have 4 wheat, we're going to run the breed command. So, it's going to find a cow in this area that can accept some wheat, and it will feed the wheat to the cow, and it will breed it with another cow. And it will, you know, do that for all 4 pieces of wheat. Then it jumps to the bucket code. It's going to go to the chest that has the bucket in it, and it's going to make sure to take it from any side. As you can see, the top here is taken up by this hopper. So it's not going to know what to do. It's not good if it can't access this inventory. Now, with the programmable controller, it wouldn't have this problem because, you know, the ghost drone that can no-clip. But with a real drone, it does have to physically look at the chest and interact with it from that side. So next up, it's going to, once again, do something for each of these buckets. It's going to find a cow, right-click on it, and get some milk. Then, once it's done with that, it will drop off all of those buckets of milk into that top hopper. Now we jump to the kill section. It's going to go to the chest that has the buckets in it, because it also has a diamond sword in it. It's going to pick up the diamond sword, and then it's going to attack a cow. And then it's going to wait a second, because we don't want it to attack with a lower cooldown and then do reduced damage and not kill 2 cows. So, it's going to then kill another cow. And you'll notice the filter says animal age is adult. You know, we want to make sure it's an adult cow and not baby, because, you know, killing babies doesn't give us any drops, obviously. Then we go to the cleanup routine. Okay, so we pick up all items within the area, and then we import all entities that are at orb in the area. So this picks up all the items, and this picks up all the experience. Then, we're just finishing up. We drop off the sword in the chest to make sure it can start the code again properly. And also, if you're using something else, like an electric-powered sword or something, it'll be useful to put it in a chest or something so that it can, you know, receive its power or durability back. And then we drop off all the items in that drawer, and then we drop off all the memory essence in that liquid hopper, which puts it in the tank. And then we wait for 5 minutes because, you know, the cows need to cool down. And then once it reaches the end here, this is the last bit of code, it just goes right back to the start. So you don't need to have any special code that goes on the bottom here. This is the end of the section. Also, these subroutines don't need something on the bottom. You can see it goes into the subroutine and does what it needs to. We right-click the entities. We have the breeding and the milk subroutines, and this is where it's going to send them. So, yeah, this is a basic cow farm. Now, there are better ways to do this, and with the programmable controller, everything's easier as usual. But, you know, if you want to just use a regular drone as opposed to the programmable controller, this will do the job. If you're doing it in the controller, the code won't be that different. You just have to not be worried about the directionality of inventory interactions. But yeah, once again, the drone is getting to work. It's breeding the cows, and you might want to set the wait timer to be a little different or have more cows or something. Ideally, maybe you want to run like 8 cows and double that timer. But yeah, now there aren't any adult cows in the pen, so, you know. But you get the point. This is a functional cow farm. I just have to properly organize it so that it would it would have more cows to work with. I just use 4 because it's a small number. Okay, so here's a monstrosity of a system. This is auto crafting. It looks a little more complicated than applied energistics, doesn't it? It also takes longer to set up, it's more complex, and yeah, it's a lot harder to work with. I would only use it if you have no other option, or, you know, you have to for some reason. Or you just want to. That's always a choice. Anyway, yeah, this is going to start here, and it's going to put it on standby immediately. What that means is it's going to wait until it has something to do. So, it's going to jump right to stock because it has plenty to do if you just place it down, and it makes sure it's stocked up on all these raw ingredients. Now, obviously, I'm creatively sourcing these, but they're crafting components, not the items we're trying to craft here. No, that comes in when we do the craft check, and of course we have each of these ingredient retrieval sub-routines. And then we have this main loop of crafting to see if it has a sufficient stock of all of these items. If it doesn't, then it's going to go into the subroutine and start crafting them. And when it's done, it's going to place them all in the chest. But, yeah, we're going to place it down, we're going to watch it work. So it starts, it takes some compressed iron, it takes some glass, it takes some wool, and then it gets right to work. It's going to go through all of its recipes and keep retrieving these items to make sure that it has everything it needs to keep crafting. And yeah, this is going to be a bit of a slow process because it's going to craft everything one at a time. This is not suitable for endgame, to say the least, but it's something neat for the early game if you want to use it. I at least had some fun setting it up, coming up with that complex code. This was mainly to show off the crafting widget, and you can see here, yeah, crafting widget, there it is, plenty of them. It can also handle external machines, like this, see? It's crafting reinforced tubes. Isn't that lovely? And it's going to keep taking them until it has enough. It can also put things into this chest to make the advanced tubes. I don't know if I'm going to wait long enough for you to see that, but yep. And when it's eventually finished, it's going to dump everything it has into this chest. I will at least speed this up just to, you know, let it keep going. There we are. Yeah, let's put that in. We kind of need that. Oops. But look, it's putting it in. And then this can take it. And it's going to put everything into the stock chest once it, you know, finishes going through everything. Yep, and there you go. You saw it just dump everything off into this chest that it had. And now it starts the cycle all over again. It's a neat little auto crafting system. Dronathy over here. Well, I guess his name is Autocraft. I'm gonna call him Dronathy. Yeah, Dronathy's doing his job. Good job, Dronathy. Well, he's almost done. Oh, actually, he just finished. Yeah, when he's done, he's gonna go into standby mode. That basically means he's not gonna use very little. He's not gonna use very much pressure because he's just sitting here, you know, chilling until I take something out of the chest. He sees that I've taken something out of the chest, and he has to stock it again and start crafting more heat pipes to make up for the stock. Okay, one last code example. This is going to teleport me from anywhere back to my base, and by my base I just mean specific coordinates that I set it to, but you can use this as a replacement for the home command if you want. So I can just place this drone wherever. Realistically, it will always end up at the home, but, you know. So I right click with this remote, I click teleport, you'll see it firing up, and once it's ready, it teleports over to me, picks me up, then charges up again, and teleports me back to this specific location. So now if I were to call it again, it'll come back over here. Oh, okay. Don't have any air grate tube modules nearby. Whoops. Yeah. Oops. But you kind of get the point here. So let's look at the code. The code is actually fairly simple for a change. So first we have the start command, obviously, and then it's always going to sit on standby unless I want it to do something. Because, you know, why have it waste air pressure if it's just going to be sitting there waiting around? You also want to make sure the home location for it is chunk loaded so that it's always, you know, recharging if it needs it or whatever. Then we have a coordinate condition. This coordinate condition is checking if x1 is greater than or equal to x2. So what are x1 and x2? Well, the variable 1, or coordinate 1, is this octothorpe teleport. You might also call that hashtag teleport, or pound teleport, or whatever. But anyway, the second coordinate is this 100. So what it's going to do is it's going to see if this teleport global variable, that's what the hashtag means, it's checking this global variable is greater than or equal to 1. And if it is greater than or equal to 1, it's going to run the teleport subroutine. And so that consists of getting my player position. This player money sign player underscore position equals your player name is a specific global variable that is always being tracked by the game, and it can tell a drone where you currently are. This could also be used for, say, having a drone protect you while you're out and about. You know, you could have it like always be above your head or something. But yeah, so this player variable is going to use this coordinate operator, and it's going to add my player position to this coordinate operator. And so what that means is it's going to start by making a new player variable, and it's going to be 000, but then it's going to add my current coordinates, because it's on the right, to this coordinate. And once it gets that, it's going to save it as a new variable in the drone called player. And so now it's going to teleport to the player, you know, me, and then it's going to pick me up, filter to players, it's only going to pick up players, and it goes to the player's location, and then it's going to teleport back to that home that is set with a GPS tool or whatever. And then finally it's going to look at that global teleport variable again, and it's going to say, I need to subtract 1 now to reset it, so that you can start the process over. It's not very complicated. Now we also have the remote, of course. I should go over that. So if we're looking at this teleport button, You can see it's the global variable teleport, of course. And this is going to set the value of teleport to 1. And then it's going to, that's what it does. It sets it to 1. And then the code reads that, okay, this teleport variable is equal to or greater than this coordinate. And then it runs the teleport subroutine, and it will go back, and then it fixes it, so I could start over. And this works from anywhere as long as the chunk that this is in is loaded, and it has pressure in it, obviously. But, yeah, pretty simple code. Once you understand how coordinates work, you're initializing it when you make it. So, like this player coordinate, this is being initialized when I add this to it. It's just saying, okay, so started at 0, add this. But yeah, that's teleporting with drones. Pretty handy, I guess, if you don't have the home command. I guess we've pretty much gone over everything at this point, huh? Well, I hope you've learned a lot. I'm fairly responsive to the comments, if you have any. You'll probably have some. It is a very complex mod after all. But thank you for watching. This has been Pick. I'm glad to have seen you, and I hope to see you again.